Hello people, we're starting the stream a little early just to see that everything's okay. Currently running with the Logitech Caplio, which is the top webcam in the Logitech range. The old webcam I had, the C930E, unfortunately cashed its chips in before last week's YouTube live stream, and I had to go back on a second C930E that very generously was given to me by VK3AML, Mick, for which thanks, Mick. You got me out of a bit of a hole last week, but as a result of being cut back to one webcam, I couldn't run Zoom on the second computer. I'm hoping to do that tonight. The picture quality should have improved. The Brio, which I'm now running through, is a 4K webcam, although we're only running it at 1080p, so it's sending a man to do a boy's job. I've got a feeling that there may be some prejudicing of fluidity of motion. I can see an occasional hint of a drop frame, but that might be a function of the greater amount of CPU load caused by the higher definition camera and the need to down convert from 4K to 1080p for these streams. I'll just check that we've got a stream, and it seems that we have, so everything's working well this week, which I'm very relieved to hear. Last week was a bit of a disaster. 9:29, still 60 seconds to go, so just giving you some idea of the definition that this can do and the automatic focus that it can achieve. That is the oldest book I have on electricity and telegraphy. As you will see in a moment, it dates from 1870, so it's 152 years old. Written by Robert Ferguson. And these things were very lavishly illustrated with woodcuts. Here, for example, on the left you see an example of capacitors in parallel, in other words, Leyden jars in parallel. So they knew something of electric theory even then. There is a hand generator spinning two coils of wire in front of a horseshoe magnet to produce the electricity and take it off through commutator. And surprisingly, at that stage, they had a device called the Reese Telephone. I'll just try and get that. Some strange reason this won't focus so well this time. Hopefully, there we go. The Reese Telephone was a predecessor of Alexander Graham Bell's telephone that worked on metallic contact against a diaphragm that you'd speak into, so it could only produce buzzes, not articulate sounds. And the reproduction was by a coil operating by magnetoelectric on what looks like an upturned cigar box. But that was around in 1870. Couple more illustrations. A generator of that period, 1870, which even then had an oil drip can marked C, and very long, effectively a horseshoe magnet that took off the power. And finally, there is a cross-section of the Atlantic telegraph cable of 1866. So there you go. It's 9:32, I'm late to be on air. Hello, this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, operating the usual Saturday night transmission, followed by callback and Zoom on 147.475 megahertz, And if you care to look for the video component of what we're transmitting, please refer to the phrase which you can Google, VK3AML 24 September 2022. That's VK3AML 24th September 2022. If you Google that phrase, you should be taken to the YouTube live stream that we're currently running. And currently running also with a new webcam with improved, we hope, colour rendition and definition, even within the 1080p system that we're using. Well, on that subject, first film of the night, the unboxing of the said Logitech webcam. This is taken on my back veranda just yesterday. There's an image of the camera as it's packed in the cam with its base on it. And the material underneath was a little bit difficult to get out. As you can see, I was battling with the box. But in there you find 1.5 metres of connecting cable, a little thing that's actually a trapdoor, a security trapdoor that goes over the lens of your camera, mechanical installation instructions, and guarantees in about 40 different languages. There is the connecting cable, and there's a little dust-free bag to put over the device while it's not in use. So then we take the camera out of its plastic packing. With any luck, I'll get it out. There it goes. And you can see that the front has 2 holes for microphones. Back has a USB connector. The base is not terribly practical. You can actually rip that base off and use the 1/4" Whitworth thread mounting that's underneath that. And we've now taken off the protective cellophane, and that's the camera as we use it now. It's actually operating now. But at the moment I have it on a little tripod on my rack pointed at me across the room using a 1/4" Whitworth thread tripod. And there's the thread underneath there. I don't think I quite got that plastic base off. Logitech Brio, it's one of the top cams in the line. I decided to upgrade from the C930E that we previously had, as it failed on us, unfortunately. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the regular Saturday night test transmission and web stream, YouTube live stream. If you care to Google VK3AML 24 September 2022, you should be able to get us. The main change to the webcam image that I can see is that the previous webcam made me look like I had a purple nose and purple lips, and that I had something wrong with my heart or maybe high blood pressure. At least now it looks a little bit more on the natural side. And the definition, certainly from what I'm seeing on the return stream, is up on what it was. Yesterday, or the day before yesterday actually, I had a visit from 2 radio hams. One was young Tom, VK3FTOM, one of the most active of the very young radio amateurs, and shortly after, concurrently, we got a call from Leighton Moss, VK3CLJ. Leighton I hadn't seen for a very long time. And Leighton dropped in a book which I should alert people to. I know that quite a few people are interested in the old coastal radio service that opened in 1912-13 through most of Australia on long wave, principally. VIM for Melbourne, VIL Flinders Island, VIS Sydney, etc., etc. Most of them operating on 500 kilohertz with ancillary transmissions on other frequencies. But this book by Lawrence Durrant was, let me see, it was published published in 1986 and contains a full history of the various stations of the Coastal Radio Service. There's Pennant Hills down on the bottom right there, and Clarence Street, Sydney, the setup for students at the Marconi School of Wireless on the top left there. So great thanks to Leighton Moss for dropping that off. I'll certainly read it with interest, Leighton, and get that back to you in due course. And if people are interested, the book is called The Sea Watchers, The Story of Australia's Coast Radio Service by Lawrence Durrant, published in 1986. Now, VK3FTOM has given me permission to run a few of his recently shot video pieces that he shot with his rather nice mobile phone. And I'll just run these for you. With Tom DeMamiel FTOM at recent HAM events, and the first event was the International Lighthouse Weekend at Cape Schank, which you'll see and hear in a moment. This image actually was taken by VK3TGX.
VK5 Kilo Lima Delta calling.
VK5 Kilo Lima Kilo Lima Delta. G'day, this is VK3 Bravo Juliet Alpha Portable. And named this way is Tom Tango Oscar Mike. Usual call signs VK3FTOM, but operating under the club station call today. Good to get you here on 40 metres and you're 5'9" into AU00 number 12, Cape Schank Lighthouse.
Yes, VK3CJA, VK5 KLD. Yeah, I didn't quite get the number of the Cape Schank lighthouse, but yeah, good to hear you. And yeah, you're 5 and 9 here into Adelaide. Nice sunny day here. I hope it's okay there. VK3BJA, VK5 KLD, the name is Wes.
Yeah, QSL, there's QSL, name this way is Tom, and the number is 00 AU, Alpha Uniform 00 number 12, Alpha Uniform 00 number 12, Cape Schank Lighthouse.
Yeah, roger that, I got AU00 number 12, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, you're the fourth lighthouse I've had this afternoon. I got the one at Lake Alexandrina, and I got the one at Queenscliff, and the one at Split Point. So Cape Schank, and you're number 4. So yeah, thanks very much. I hope the weather and everything's good there, and you're getting lots of contacts. So thanks for your efforts. And, yeah, good luck with it. Good to make your contact. VK3 Bravo Juliet Alpha, VK5 Kilo Lima Delta.
Yeah, VK5 Kilo Lima Delta from VK3JR.
And that's VK3FTOM, Tom.
No worries there, Les. And good to get you here on 40 metres, cracking signal here, and yeah, good to get you, and 7 trees for now. Anyway, QRZ Lighthouse, VK3BJA Portable.
And now, that was VK3TGX's coverage. Now Tom VK3FTOM visited the Shepparton Ham Fest a couple of weeks ago, and this is his coverage of the Ham Fest. The guys selling at the entry door, a quick pan of the people waiting to go in, and as you can see there was quite a good attendance there up at Shepparton. Guys selling the tickets at the entry for SADARC, SADARC, the local radio club. Oh, the bikies are out. Obviously buying some gear. And here we do the entry door shuffle. Do I recognise anybody there? I think Dave 3ASE is in the background of this shot somewhere. And a few Melbourne hams I can see there. There's Dave, wearing a cap with the sideburns there. You can see him holding a little red bag, which no doubt he will fill with stuff that he can use for his station up north of Bendigo now. Shortwave Australia, he calls it, 4835 kilohertz and 2310 kilohertz. And now Tom's entered, There's Lee Moyle, on behalf of the Wireless Institute, no doubt. Lee 3GK selling his amplifiers, I won't say what power they are, and VK3YV Tony. Brendan 3MH, the ladies from Lara. The antennas, bits and pieces on sale. Incidentally, I've muted the original audio on this as it was musical and I don't have a license to play that sort of music. Sorry, Tom. General view of the HAMFEST, and obviously things were going pretty well there, so it's credit to Shepparton putting on a HAMFEST of this scale up there. Very close to the old Radio Australia site, which no doubt a few people visited out of curiosity afterwards. Several hundred people there at the peak, apparently. There's an old radio, Second World War, I think, and the books being sold, I think, by WIA. Neil, VK3ZVX, selling some measuring gear. Who else do we recognise here? Usual suspects. I think I saw Chris Belmont there.
Whatever books you like, my wife is sitting over there. She will make sure that you don't take any more than you should. So it's a black ticket, which was all the door prize tickets, B74. B74. If they're not here, looks like I keep the books. No, if they're not here, we'll draw again. B74. No, go again. B61. B61. Okay, thank you.
And these are the people who had the lucky tickets at the door.
Go down to the lovely lady in the mauve jumper. She'll look after you with the books. Okay, now we'll do the door prize. First, raffle prize. It's a bit longer. We want the first one first or the second one? A multimeter, okay. Multimeter, auto-ranging true RMS digital multimeter. You can never have enough multimeters later, can you? It's a purple ticket C50. Charlie 50, C50. Hello, yeah, we got a winner, Charlie 50, C50 in purple.
Congratulations.
Now we'll do the couple of little UHF CB radios. This was interesting when I went to the guy at JCar and asked him if he can do a deal for us. He said, I've been thinking about what prizes to give you guys. I can do them at the right price. He said, you're all amateur radio operators, so you'd love a couple of CBs, wouldn't you? What could I say? So, purple ticket.
CB radios at a HAMFEST. This is a new twist.
Echo 67.
John DQ on the left.
And the lucky last is a gas soldering iron and a couple of butane canisters to fire the soldering iron. Okay, purple again. E59. E59. Echo 59. Okay, thank you all very, very much for your attendance. All being well, that we don't get any more pandemics, we'll have our HAMFEST again.
And there was the Shepparton Ham Fest for 2022, shot by, well, videoed by VK3FTOM, Tom, and thank you for the usage of that, Tom. Very much nice of you to let me use it. Another video shot this week by Tom, which is worth my drawing attention to, is for an amateur that I have a huge amount of respect for. Lovely guy, highly cultured, knows a lot about music and law, which has been his business for most of his working life as a legal person. VK3JR, Frank, and Tom again visited Frank this week and got a shot of some of his antennas and of Frank operating. Frank is a white cane operator, and here's his HF dipole.
3 Japan Radio, VK3JR listening.
VK3 Japan Radio, Untitled Radio Zulu. Good afternoon. Good to hear you for the first time. A new call in my log. VK3 Juliet Radio, your 557. My name is Yuri. Juliet, India, Romeo, India. Japan, Italy, Radio, Italy, Yuri. VK3 Japan Radio,
OK2 Radio Zulu, VK3JR. Thank you, Erie. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you for coming back to my call. You are also 5 and 7 into Melbourne in Australia. Very, very good to hear from you and to contact you for the first time. My name is Frank, Foxtrot, Romeo, Alpha, November, Kilo. Frank is my name, and I'm located in a suburb of Melbourne, capital of the state of Victoria. Back to you, OK2JZ, VK3JR.
Very good, Frank, VK3JR, OK2 Radio Zulu. Very, very nice to know, Frank. That's the report. We should do the acting. I hope you say thank you well, Mike. VK3JR, OK2 Radio Zulu. Bye-bye, Frank.
Bye-bye, 7-3, Yuri.
And that was Frank, VK3 Juliet Romeo, VK3JR, with whom I've sunk many a cup of coffee at the old EMDRC in years gone by. Haven't seen much of him just lately. You can usually catch up with Frank on a Friday night chatting to VK3SL, either on 70 centimetres on 160 metres NBFM. Frank is particularly interested in music, and Steve 3SL, being a professional cellist and a music teacher, of course, they have a lot in common. So their conversations will leave you breathless as to their respective knowledge of music, and in Frank's case, legalese. He has 50 years of experience of the legal system. He has my sympathy. Anyway, to get on to the real subject of the night, it being 9:51, software-defined radio, very much the future of ham radio, at least in my humble opinion. The very first software-defined radio that I saw was in the shack of ZL4RMF, Ron, in Saddle Hill, south of Dunedin in New Zealand. Ron has an all-digital shack. It was the first all-digital shack I ever saw. I actually was visiting there with VK7MJ about 2019, I think this was. And I was very impressed with what I saw. There is Mike, VK7, Mike Juliet, on the right, with Ron, ZL4RMF, at the background there, demonstrating his combination of flex radio system, large viewing screen, 2 large viewing screens, and a linear amplifier capable of a kilowatt. In New Zealand, a kilowatt is quite legal. And we were impressed by what we saw, and this is the first time we saw an all-digital shack. Either of us had ever seen an all-digital shack. Very impressive display. Very clean. I mean, you don't need all the little bits and pieces hanging around that you do with an analog shack. But the second digital shack I saw here in Gippsland. That's a picture of Ron's Flex radio screen looking at a part of, I think, 40 metres. And this was the first all-digital shack that I saw in Victoria. This is Roscoe Hammond, VK3KRH, down in Mardan in Gippsland, in among the Gippsland green hills. He has a very quiet location, in fact the most quiet HF location I have ever heard in Victoria, and good grounding because of the nice green rolling hills of Gippsland. And we had a great afternoon there and an evening watching him operating on this. Myself, 3ASE, and I'll think of his name in a minute. He has the valve stand at most of the HAMFESTs. Anthony, VK3 Juliet India Alpha. Anthony, just hang on. I have to reboot a computer here. My second computer seems to automatically boot down at intervals, and that's a bit of a nuisance. And it's still booted down, so I have to push it again. Good, it's booting up again. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, and if you want to see the video that goes with this audio, please Google VK3AML 24 September 2022. That's Google the phrase VK3AML 24 September 2022. Another person who's just recently got into the ANAN software-defined radio is Joe VK3YSP. And Tom, thank you so much for the usage of your clips. Tom visited 3YSP and got just a little bit of Tom operating the new ANAN all-digital rig. And we'll follow this with Bob AB5N in America doing a review of the ANAN 7, I think it's called the ANAN 7000 DLE, which is this particular rig. Internal computer in the thing with a full CPU and motherboard, driving an external screen, and all of the controls, or most of the controls, are via the screen and the mouse key. So over to Joe 3YSP. Joe Gonzalez goes all digital. Video shot by Tom 3FTOM in September 2022.
Hello, VK3SRC.
Sorry, Joe. Don, VK3AML.
Oh, hello, Don. How you going? I didn't catch your voice there. I had the volume turned down a bit. Yeah, just having a look. I've got Tom FTOM here.
Right, no worries. Good afternoon, Tom. Yep, well, looks like your
Now, you have a look at his signal.
Right, I heard the two-tone.
Yes, we're just looking at single shots of that. And it seems to be working okay. Actually, at the moment, let's see. It's so I've got the automatic one turned off, and that was after you got it. When you do the two-tone, you just let the amplifier warm up a little bit, and about the third time, it's
Bob Nagy, AB5N, back here with another equipment review. Today we really got a super interesting radio. Now, all of us are familiar with the radios from the three big Japanese manufacturers. I mean, no surprises there. We've been with them for years. And the two major American manufacturers, Elecraft and Flex, that are out there. But there are also some minor players in this game, some small manufacturers out there where you have or may have not heard of their products. And one of them today that we're going to talk about is Apache Labs and their ANAN series of SDR radios. Originally, this radio was produced in India and in their what they call Silicon Valley of India, and designed by this small core of engineers from around the globe. The software that runs on these radios most commonly is a version of Power SDR, HP SDR, which is an open source program which was used on the earlier Flex radios, but this is a highly modified version of that, customized for these ANAN SDRs. And the current version is called Thetis, so that's what we're running right now, what they call Protocol 2. These radios have been around for quite a long time now, and the software and firmware is pretty well ironed out and very sophisticated. So let's take a look at the ANAN 7000 DLE Mark II, the current offering. It does two things extremely well: receive and transmit. The 7000 DLE2 is a sleek-looking black box, about 3.5 inches tall, 10.5 inches wide, and 11 inches deep. It's got two good-looking handles on the front. It's got an RJ45 for your Ethernet connection, a mic input, headphone output, and CW key input. A little rocker switch on the right, and little power indicators on the bottom left. The rear of the box is filled with connectors. You've got a whole bunch of antenna connectors, 3 main ones, which I love. Then you've got your RX2 input for your diversity reception, your transverter input, and a couple of other connectors there. They're BNC, so you do have to use an adapter to 259 there. You've got left and right speaker connections and 6 RCA connectors, which is PTT in, out, and some audio connections. To the right is a DB9, which is interesting because you can set up different on-off states to control other hardware with different things that are happening in the radio. We've got a GPS DO clock input and transverter input. Of course, your ground connection, Anderson power pole for your power, which is reversed to the standard configuration, by the way, so you need a little adapter there. And you've got a fan DC voltage out if you want to add an additional fan to keep the unit even cooler. What's conspicuously missing is an ALC connector for your amplifier, but this radio, in concert with its software, can easily be set up to have a maximum power level which matches your amplifier perfectly. With the Mark II, they went to an improved heatsink configuration, and the fan for the unit is mounted on the bottom side of the radio. I'd like to stop for a second and talk about your most important connection to the 7000 DLE. Like the Flex radios, this has a gigabit Ethernet connection on it, and this is what connects directly to your PC or to your router, and then your PC can access it through the router. But all of the control is done through this CAT, audio, PTT, and everything else goes through this extremely high-speed connector, and that is a very good thing. Thetis and other software packages are going to use virtual audio cables to interface with other software you're running. And also for PTTing, you can use virtual COM ports, which are available as utilities free online. Now, for those of you who are new to SDR technology, I'm not going to break it down for you here, but look at my other videos. I've got some really good SDR primers in them. What is primary to know that DSP, digital signal processing, is used in an SDR, but it can also be used in a traditional superhet transceiver. I'm not going to show you every feature and function of the 7000 DLE Mark II. It would take 3 hours. I am going to show you what makes the 7000 DLE Mark II, in combination with the Thetis software, unique. I did want to mention that the radio comes in 2 flavors, the one you saw and this one, which has an integrated i7 computer in it, so it's really plug and play. First, let's take a look at this beautiful filter board over here. Count the relays, folks. Look at those nice sized toroids over there, so incoming signals going through those preselectors are not going to swamp these filters. Here's a little block diagram of the Altera Cyclone 4 FPGA. Now, what does this mean to us? What this means is this thing can crank out the MIPS, millions of instructions per second, processing our digital RF needs without breaking a sweat. This thing's using about 35% of its ultimate capabilities. There's a massive amount of horsepower under the hood in this radio. Now, we can talk about filter functions and all kind of stuff here, but boiled down, what you need to know is this. The tighter the filter skirts are, that ultimate selectivity, the longer it takes those chips to do the job. And the more processing that takes place in those chips, the longer the delay from RF on the air to AF coming out of your speaker. You want that latency to be short, and it takes great engineering to do that. You can always throw money at it by buying more expensive chips, but radio designers have a budget limit, so it takes really good engineering to pull it off. Using the Cyclone 4 FPGA chip has ensured there's enough horsepower to pull off extremely low latency times down to 20 milliseconds. And you're also given the choice of linear phase filters with a slight bit of more delay if you so choose. Now let's talk about diversity reception. Because this has dual phase synchronous ADCs, 2 phase synchronous reception channels, it's possible to do phase cancellation of local interference. And I'm not talking random background noise. I'm talking about interfering signals that have periodicity, that look like a signal. And as well, you can use multiple antennas and control the phase between them to enhance the incoming signal. And here's a demo of using the diversity reception to cancel a local generated noise. Here's a horrific noise here. So offending local noise can be completely eliminated in most cases. And that phase level adjustment you saw me do is good for about 200 kilohertz of bandwidth. So if you tune further away than that, you sort of have to retouch it up. Let's talk about noise blanker performance next. This is a big issue for us. This has 2 modes of normal blanking and a spectral noise blanker, and they are adjustable. So let's take a look. On noise blankers, normally when you kick them in and you can kill some of the noise, you do hear some distortion on the sideband, and I do not hear any distortion on this audio.
Lima Echo Echo, call sign November 0, Golf Foxtrot Victor. Back to you.
Another artifact I always hear is when you kick in the noise blanking, you can hear you can hear signals, nearby strong signals bleeding through. This doesn't happen as well. One of these noise blankers actually interpolates and creates the missing sound from the noise spikes that were removed from the audio, which results in distortion-free sound when using the blanker. Now let's talk about digital noise reduction, the most important one. And this is where these high-power radios really shine, or they're just average. Most digital noise reduction systems use what's called LMS, and it's an algorithm used for digital noise reduction. 7000 DLE has LMS in its first mode, but it has a second mode, which is called spectral noise reduction, and this uses models of speech to determine its operation, and it results in the best digital noise reduction on the ham radio market today. There's one that's pretty close. It's the FTDX101D, but they just updated their firmware, and the DNR is not as good as the original one. So let's take a listen to this one.
I didn't have your complete call the first time. Well, thanks for the nice report. And you're coming in here about a 5.7 to 5.8. Very nice signal. So many stations on. The band is really packed, so I'm glad to see 10 meters open like this. We have a nice warm day here. It's in the upper 80s already. I'm planning to hit the golf course in about an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm going to have to queue up shortly and go have some lunch. But to see 10 meters really cooking like this, over.
So using all these noise mitigation tools, spectral digital noise reduction, which you just heard, a diversity phase noise cancellation, and an interpolating noise blanker, and it's in the top 10 list at Sherwood, it's a very hard combination to beat. And I'm just going to say it, it's the best receiver I've used in 48 years of hamming. And we haven't even talked about the transmitter yet. Now, you know I'm not a fanboy. I'm not in any brand's pocket. I like good radios. But I'm going to start sounding a little bit hyperbolic here, and I don't want to lose my credibility, but we all know Kenwood is the audio transmit king. I mean, they always have been. But I'm going to tell you, it may not be that way anymore. The transmitter in the 7000 is a direct conversion SDR. No surprises here, that's how it should be done. It does use an LDMOS driver device, that's unique and good, and it uses the industry standard Mitsubishi RD100 HHF finals. I love them. FTDX101D uses them. They're the industry choice right now, a nice device. But it is a 12-volt class device, and it does produce IMD products, distortion products. Of course, all transmitter chains do produce some IMD. What this thing has, though, is adaptive pre-distortion. I'm going to call it an IMD optimizer. They call it Pure Signal 2. So what we're talking about here is that the radio samples its output and pre-distorts the signal coming into the PA amplifier to compensate for that IMD, thus linearizing the amplifier way better than even a Class A transmitter. Companies out there have been saying they'd implement this for years, but ANAN is the only one who has. So here's a classic two-tone test of the transmitter, and you can see the little Christmas tree stuff on the side, down about 30 dB. This is courtesy VK3AML. We kick on the pure signal, and bam, they're down 50 dB. A heck of a lot cleaner. Let's take a look at sideband. Here's a classic sideband transmission, stuff above and below that you don't want. Kick on the pure signal, adaptive pre-distortion, and down 55 dB. That is super clean. Now, although it's completely automated at this point, you just turn it on. The pure signal, and pure signal 2 it's called now, display screen looks like this, showing you the adaptive pre-distortion going on. So very, very interesting, and of course a great net effect. So clean is great, but what about audio quality? This is where it starts to get fun. Well, you've got at your disposal a whole selection of broadcast-grade power tools to make your audio sound fabulous. It has split-band pre- and post-compression, just like a broadcast audio processor. It has a regular TX equalizer, and you can set the frequency ranges on these things. Of course, it has a receive equalizer. It has noise gating, so it quiets in between each of your words. It has the leveler, which we'll describe, really punches up the clarity. It lets you control the overall gain and the decay of the AGC. That's really nice. It has a standard wideband compressor like we're all used to, a little audio compressor. It has unlimited TX profile memory, so set yourself up exactly what you want for, say, my 3 kilohertz setting, normal setting, save it with a name. You can set up all the profiles you want, call them up instantly. And it has the ability to take analog and USB digital microphones. So say you've got a USB headset and you want to use the microphone on the headset, no problem whatsoever. And of course it does ESSB, wide bandwidth SSB for the guys on 14178. Set it to whatever bandwidth transmit you want, save it as a memory, and you're ready to go. I almost forgot the phase rotation control, where you can linearize the amount of energy above and below the zero line.
Okay, this is Alpha Bravo 5 Nancy transmitting with a Elecraft MH3 hand microphone into a ICOM 7610. It's the local receiver, 54321 12345.
12345 4321 Alpha Bravo 5 Nancy testing. Amplitude modulation, same hand microphone, same local receiver, AB5 Nancy, 12345, and out. Well, there you go. My first attempt at setting up the audio correctly as a new operator. I'll probably walk it in quite a bit. You want to hear it done right? Look for NA1A, Duke, on 20 meters usually. He's running an ANAN. He has it set up correctly. Oh my gosh. Then you'll hear what I'm talking about. As it stands right now, let's just take a look at the screen here. We've got the power button. We've got several menus up here for different things. We have turning on our second receiver over here. Just click on it, and we've got 2 of them like that. Click it off. I have a Bob's S-meter up here. It's a free utility to give you a nice analog-looking S-meter. Really nice. Got our volume controls here, master, and for each individual receiver. Automatic gain control, that's self-explanatory. Drive, which is transmitter power out. Our AC, AGC selections over here, including a custom one you can set up, and our attenuator. You can go steps of 1 dB, or you can do 10, 20, and 30. Squelch control for FM. Panning around over here, and it just allows you to move the display to the left, right, up, and down frequency. I don't use that much. We'll recenter it. We've got all of our VFO A and B controls like you'd find on a regular transceiver here, including RIT and XIT. Our virtual audio cables are selectable on and off down here. That's for when you're using the digital modes and you want to route audio to your outside programs. Here's all of our noise mitigation, you might call it. We got our noise reduction 1 and 2, the really awesome one. And automatic notch filter, noise blankers, several selections there, a spectral noise blanker, all kind of fun stuff to mess with to get the noise away and the signal up. Simple mute button, multiple notch filter, manual notch filter. Anyway, then because we have 2 speaker outputs in the back, you can control, have one receiver on one and one receiver on the other, and you can control their volumes individually or pan back and forth. So we can easily open up a second receiver and we can have a pan-of-wall display or whatever we like on it, have them both showing. But also if you hit the multi-RX button, you can open up another receive frequency inside of that single receiver. So you can have a lot of receive options with this setup. C-Tune's a good button because it allows you, when you click it, to just move the actual passband around the visual screen as it stands. If you turn that off, well, you're doing the opposite and moving the background with the fixed passband in the center. You can have averaging on and off on the display really quickly, just sort of smooth it out here, or you can just show the peaks. Here's the microphone control area with your standard gain, your standard compressor, and then we have a look-ahead Vox. This is really unique. You're not going to drop syllables. This is actually a look-ahead Vox, and our DEXP, which is the noise gate. Zoom is zooming in and out on your spectral display, all the way from very tight to all the way in the full bandwidth that it can present at one time. We have our transmit profiles over here for selecting the different pre-selections you've set up. You can download all kind of ones, or you can make your own and put them in here. So I've got, wide, narrow, DX, all kind of things. And on the fly, you can adjust your low and high points on the transmit audio. Our equalizers for receive and transmit, we can turn on and off right from this place right here. This little button here is a TX filter. It allows you to see the actual width of the TX filter on top of the receive filter. So I do want to see if I'm transmitting and receiving at the same bandwidth. That's pretty easy to do there. Here's our pre-selections for jumping to different bandwidths in the mode that you're in, and each one has a different set of them, and each of these are individually configurable to whatever you like. Or you can just go ahead and slide the width over here and get your filter narrow or wider, or shift the center on like the old IF shift like that. Plus, as well, when you're just receiving, which is really great, you can go ahead and take your mouse and drag the filter around and change the filter width. And this is really nice to have as a feature. Some of them don't have this. Here's all your modes, including digital radio mondial, if there's still transmissions in that. You got your AM, sync AM, and the normal setup over here, and your band selections. What's nice about this is you can just hit WWV like this and go through the WWV frequencies, including the CHU Canada frequencies, which is sort of nice because I never can remember what those are. But that way you go through all the standard time clocks there. You can go from HF mode over to shortwave mode over here, and it'll have all of your shortwave bands, including broadcasts. And this receiver is pretty excellent on the very low frequencies. Doing that is a challenge for SDRs, so getting that right is a big step in the right direction. Most SDRs have difficulty at broadcast band and below. On our meter over here, our sort of a VOM, I think they actually call it, it's a multimeter they call it, you can choose all the stuff over here, ALC and forward reflected, mic EQ, and check all your levels. In the manual, it'll tell you how to set up your mic and that kind of thing. And we can go for an averaged signal or the regular signal, or outputs of the ADCs themselves, left or right, 1 or 2. We have 2 ADCs in here, or turn it off completely. And what's nice is when you just click on the top of this meter, it'll cycle through the 3 presets for, say, reception right now, which is you want an S meter, or you want it to show in dBm, or you want to show it in microvolts. That's pretty keen. Sometimes I'll leave it in S meter. Also, you have the option of showing and keeping the peaks in the last several seconds over here with a little meter underneath. Let's move the Bob meter down over here. We've got our 2 VFOs, A and B over here, and you can sync them up when you press this button. A lot of times you want to do that when you're doing diversity reception, something like that. But you have some other controls here, including your tuning steps, your band stacking registers, how many frequencies and such, and receive antenna control. So this is how I set it up most of the time. Your tuning ratio when you're dragging it around like this is going to be dependent on how zoomed in you are. Okay, because you're moving the same amount on the screen, but you're moving a lot more frequency. So it's variable, the tuning rate, along with how zoomed in you are. Now that said, for the tune steps up here, this is for your mouse wheel if you're using a controller like that. So a lot of times I'll get pretty close, and then I'll just say I'm going to pop right onto the 100 kilohertz even frequency if a guy's really rock solid right on an even frequency there using the mouse wheel. These I'm not going to go through each one up here, but you've got your receive and transmit equalizers, which are showing up on my other screen. There we go, like so. And your diversity reception, which you've already seen. That's pretty darn good. And some other stuff, what is really nice is not only can you record off of the air and save recordings and have your CQs and all that pre-canned, but you can do a recording on the fly of somebody coming in, record, and then play them back to themselves immediately and transmit that back on the air. That is a feature that 95% of radios do not have, and you have to go through all kind of gyrations or use your PC to be able to do it. It's really nice when you say, gee, you got a hum on your signal or something's going on. Here's what you sound like. The only other thing I didn't really mention here that's important is this PSA, and that's the pure signal 2, which will show up on the bottom side of the screen here. When you talk, it'll show calibrating, and if it's all green, you're good. So that's the ultra-pure transmission technology that works in the Theta software in concert with the ANAN radio. This display is infinitely customizable to exactly the colors, the buttons, the kind of things that you like. You can use pre-canned skins that are there, or you can download ones that are on the internet, and then you can modify those. So I changed the background to blue, and I liked a little bit of a mustard color on the trace over there. So I wanted buttons that would sort of look like they were popping out. So it's very easy to implement this kind of stuff, and there's tons of information out there on doing just that. So that's the basic runaround here on the screen itself. Like I said, tons of stuff to discover, super customizable. The software is robust and ironed out to where I haven't had really any problems with it whatsoever. In the old days, it would bomb and all kind of things like that, early SDR software. You're getting into this now. You're in late in the game. So the people before you have trudged through the mud for you. So you're about to jump into a thing that's very well polished at this point. So in conclusion, yeah, this is not a box with knobs. You know, we all have boxes with knobs, probably more than one of them in the shack. We're used to them. You know, you can put a tuning knob on this radio, but I can tell you, I did put it on there. I can tell you, I didn't use it after a while. Once I got used to the way this thing QSYs around and everything, I didn't miss it, and it was no real help. This box is sort of like an RF laboratory because you are using the most sophisticated digital signal processing tools to carve signals out of the background. And that spectral display, that is second to none in the industry. It is as good as it gets. It is also supported by a large group of users, and you have a lot of interactivity. I interact daily with people on the forums here, on the ANAN forums. I put out questions. Well, does it do this? How do you do this? And people are constantly bouncing around giving feedback, and of course the developers are on there as well. Now, getting into this now, after so many years, this software and firmware is very sophisticated, mature, stable, and you're not an early adopter by any means. 10, 15, 20 years ago, we were early adopters. I pulled out most of my hair getting the early SDRs going, getting them stable. We're not at that point now. This thing, if nothing else happened to this radio, you would have a super sophisticated, capable, reliable radio that does everything fantastic right now if there was no more development. But that's not what's going to happen. There's going to be development with this radio. It's only using about 35% of its horsepower. A lot of great things could happen, and many things are going to happen. So it's a safe time to jump in. I'm going to give this radio 2.5 thumbs up. I don't know if I can do that here. Really, this is pure radio excitement, folks. This is why I'm in it. High-tech, cutting edge, and I think you'd have a lot of fun with this radio. So until next time, take care.
And my thanks to Bob AB5N for allowing me to use that review. And now a word from a sponsor. I'm only joking. This firm hasn't existed for about 30 years.
I suppose all of us who enjoy radio listening would agree that what we want most in our set is reliability. We want a set that won't let us down in the middle of some interesting program, a set that won't suddenly start crackling just when we have friends in for the evening. Now, there is one name in radio that stands for reliability, and it appears on some of the greatest electrical achievements of the century. All over the world, important contracts have gone to Ferranti because they have the men and the resources that make for absolute trustworthiness. You get this same quality in a Ferranti radio set. And now that shortwave listening has come in, it is all the more important that your set should be reliable. With the new Ferranti world radio sets, you can log such distant stations as Sydney, Tokyo, Bombay, Rio de Janeiro. In a single evening, when conditions are favorable, you can catch the glamour of the Far East, listen to news in English from the storm centers of Europe, or hear what's new in USA. Now, some of these distant stations come very close together on the tuning dial. Only a hair's breadth separates, for example, Schenectady and Budapest, so that on ordinary sets, it is difficult to log them. With a Ferranti, it's easy. Because of the magnetoscopic dial.
Oh.
This gives you enlarged readings of such a size that you can log your station exactly and at once. Only Ferranti sets have the magnetoscopic dial.
Magnetoscopic
and only
dial.
Are offering a complete range of all.
And that's all, fortunately, perhaps, that survives of that advert, that screen advert from 1936 for Ferranti Radios, which are no more. So that's not actually an advertisement that's valid. In that way, I managed to get away with it. This is VK3AML. If you care to Google the phrase VK3AML 24 September 2022, you should be able to see the video that goes with this audio. Moving on with software-defined receiver technology, now a review done by a representative from the LIME, L-I-M-E SDR company. And let's go over to that now.
Right, okay, you can hear me okay. Right, today I'm talking about a very introduction to software-defined radio. I'm going to start off by talking about why on earth do we need a software-defined radio? What is a software-defined radio? And I'll talk a little bit about the products that our company make. And then I'll give 3 example applications of software-defined radio, including digital television transmission and reception, Gsm Base Station, and a 4G system being deployed at the University of Guildford, and also being deployed in the Scottish Highlands somewhere. So back in the 1940s, life was frightfully simple. You had 3 modulation schemes. You had Morse code, you had the BBC transmitting AM modulation for entertainment, and there was a little bit of frequency shift keying going on. And then kind of in the 1950s, it started getting complicated. Someone invented FM, and obviously the transistor radio started taking off. And then about 1991, an explosion of radio standards took place on the back of the 2G GSM system that was released. So broadly, you can divide the different radio standards into 4 different categories. There's the various data radio standards, which you're probably very familiar with, such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LoRa, and so on. There's the mobile standards, such as 2G, 3G, and 4G. And then there's the entertainment-based systems, such as digital television, digital satellite, and their second generations, DAB and DAB2, and obviously good old-fashioned FM and AM. And then you have the navigation-based radio systems, such as GPS and Galileo, and the Japanese and Chinese versions. So if you like, this is an engineer's view of software-defined, of the radio environment. So as a designer, you're normally asked not only to produce one of these, but you have to produce some combination of these for modern day products. So for example, your 4G phone will support 3G, 2G, probably GPS and so on. So the cost of actually developing a specific piece of silicon for this suddenly becomes horrendously expensive. So software becomes a very much more affordable route to generate these. So let's flip it on its head now and look at it from the consumer's point of view. I think most of you probably will recognize this situation. You have your AM, FM radio in the kitchen. You have your Wi-Fi router somewhere in the house. You may be having DAB in your car. You got some sort of combination of satellite cable or Freeview. You'll also have your 4G tablets lying around and so on. So you have a box basically for each radio standard. My wife is a minimalist, and she would like to just have one box and not a whole room full of electronics. She also would like it to be wireless. I never quite understood that bit, but she's very keen for things to be wireless. So the idea is we have this single box software-defined radio which replaces everything else, and it's largely future-proof. So if someone invents a new software-defined radio standard, a new radio standard, it can be, an app can be downloaded and so on. So let's start looking at a little bit more detail at the software-defined radio. I first of all like to emphasize that a software-defined radio isn't the card that you buy from Crowd Supply or from Amazon, but it's actually a whole system. So you have the RF parts, which would typically include an antenna and some kind of RF filter, which prevents you being jammed by interfering signals and also stops you interfering with other systems. You also have the radio module itself, which would include some sort of transceiver unit, and then it would either include an ASIC or a field programmable gate array logic system, which provides the connection between the radio and the computer. And these will typically be using USB 2 or 3 or PCIe. And then you have your computer itself, and the repertoire of software which you can download off the internet or is supplied by the manufacturer of the equipment. Bear in mind that today's entry-level computers are now multi-core, vector maths geared up machines. So there's been a tremendous leap of progress in the hardware platforms that we have for our computers these days. And of course, they connect to good old-fashioned Ethernet, Wi-Fi, and ADSL. I could talk about our transceiver. It's a very complicated animal, and I think this is probably true for most of the radio chips used in software-defined radio. So they're highly programmable beasts. We like the term field programmable, which takes on a whole new meaning here, of course. And we're obviously looking for low power consumption, and for today's applications, you don't just have a single channel radio now, but you actually have what's called MIMO, where you would have one, maybe two transmit channels and two receive channels working on different antennas. So the idea of the company I work for is to produce the chips. We then produce the modules, and we also starting to produce entire systems for customers now. And what we're relying on is third parties to produce the software, which we then run on those products to generate the different applications. So, for example, we have both USB and PCIe products, and I'm not really into bashing the competitors. They each have their own value. But the main limitation on USB is the amount of traffic you can actually get down the USB cable. So typically for USB 3, you're looking about 30 megasamples per second for MIMO transmit and receive. So that kind of sets the maximum speed for the hardware. PCIe is a bit more relaxed than that, so typically you're looking at something like 60 megasamples per second for a full MIMO transceiver system. Some of the radios will actually have waveform playback, which I personally find very useful for debugging radios as you're developing them. Our designers have come up with all sorts of fancy cases, so there's not only an evolution of what goes inside the box, but there's also an evolution in the box that they actually come into. So a little bit about our radios. Basically, you can buy them from Crowd Supply. Other companies will sell them through Amazon. Our Crowd Supply does give a comparison to some of the competitors, which will help you choose whether our product's the right product for you or whether one of our competitor products is more suitable for your application. We have an open source policy in our company, so the actual hardware is open source. So you can actually read up about the chipsets that are gone into them, and you can then get the data sheets and learn how to program all the different parts and develop a radio at any level of detail which you wish to. We have our own LIME Suite software, which has two roles. It primarily was intended to test the chip as we developed it, but it also produces a C library, which you can then link into with your software. And then you can link into other languages, of course, such as Python. Okay, now for some typical examples. We have a digital television example here, and it's kind of the project that we quite like at LIME because it's a mixture of things. So it has one of our SDR radios in it. It has a Raspberry Pi Zero, and the software was developed by Everest Korsgaard, I think from Denmark. And he has both a transmitter and a receiver for digital television. So within a couple minutes, you can actually be broadcasting your own digital television stream, subject to the local regulations, of course, wherever you are. Another system that we have, which is actually deployed here, which I believe is working reasonably well, is a GSM base station. I think on each of the data porter cabins here, they have one of these base stations, and it consists of a Raspberry Pi, again one of our SDR modules, and a power supply, and is providing GSM coverage over this site. It's based on open source software developed in Germany by our friends at Osmocom. So it's actually, as I say, an open source, free to use system. At the high end of the system, there's also, we have systems with a high processor, so i7 processor, and this is actually being used to generate 4G signals and allows you to do video telephones around the office or in a small local area. And it's also being used in some macro base station developments. So for example, we have a trial system at the University of Surrey in Guildford on top of the 5G IC Centre. And another system is being rolled out, which I think is 20 watts, and is going to be deployed in the Orkney Islands in Scotland. And this is using commercially available software such as Amerisoft and Quartus. And I think the hardware is on the LimeNet project for those who want to follow up on that. So if you like, it's a combination of second generation professional quality software-defined radios, developments in the microprocessors themselves, and also developments in the open source software and also commercial software that's enabling these radio systems now to be used for entertainment, for surveillance, for mobile communications. And we're gradually making progress to that single box radio. Okay, that concludes my talk.
The LIME SDR, and I note that Terry VK3FTJS has actually built a system based on the LIME SDR and tells me that it's working extremely well. From time to time he sends me photographs of the mountings of the various components for it, and it's a much less expensive approach than, of course, the very top-end ANAN is. Well within the reach of everybody who can afford Yaesu or Kenwood or other more common equipment. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. If you care to Google VK3AML 24 September 2022, you should be able to get our video component. And this week we're running with a Logitech Brio camera, much higher definition than the previous one, much better low light results, better, hopefully, colour rendition, so I don't look like I've got an oxygen deficiency making my face turn purple anymore as it used to. I think something a little lighter now. We've had quite a bit of heavy theory in the last 2 reviews on LIME SDR and the one done by Bob AB5N, to whom my thanks are due. He shot me an email giving me permission to use that clip. And I have to say that there are some compensations in being 68 years old. The physical situation is not one of them, but in my youth, in my childhood particularly, there was one name in science broadcasting that stood out. Almost a forgotten name now. He's passed away 35 years ago, almost to the day. And those of you who are from my generation will recognise this man immediately.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, and teachers? I'm Julius Sumner Miller, and physics is my business. And my program today has to do especially with this: how to produce electricity. And I call to your attention the quotation marks in the word for the word produce. We do not really produce electricity. The electric stuff is always there in abundance. Always. Positive and negative charges. All we do is separate them by some means and thus make available what we call a difference of potential, whereupon if we connect the points where the charges are gathered, we have a flow of charge, which we call an electric current. Now the question is, how do we produce an electric current? Let's go to some absolutely primitive things. Here I have a lemon. So somebody says, now, what are you going to do with a lemon, Professor? I'm going to make an electric circuit, produce electric current. I have here a sliver of zinc. I'm going to stick it into the lemon. I have here a sliver of copper. I'm going to stick it into the lemon. Notice the requirement: 2 different metals and an electrolyte. A solution which makes available some stuff for electric migration. Here is a meter, a very sensitive galvanometer, a galvanic meter. Its purpose is merely to detect the existence of an electric current, not really to make any measurements as to how much it is. I'm going to connect this meter to the zinc electrode and another terminal of the meter to the copper electrode. Now watch that meter. Watch it. Oh-ho! There you are. Now I'm going to exchange the polarity. Watch it now. Direction the other way. So, this that I have here, an acid solution and 2 different metals, we call a voltaic, V-O-L-T-A-I-C, a voltaic cell named after that wonderful Italian Alessandro Volta of Como, Italy, who is commemorated indeed in Como with a temple to Alessandro Volta. Now, I say, 2 different metals and an electrolyte. Observe the following. The saliva in my mouth is an electrolyte. I have here 2 different metals. I'm going to put these 2 metals in my mouth. Watch the meter. Watch it very closely. Watch. Watch. Got to see the meter. Aha. There was a motion of the needle. So you see, the acid solution in my mouth is the electrolyte and two different metals. Question, can I get an electromotive force, a difference of potential from a grapefruit? Yes. Can I get it from an orange? Yes. Can I get it from an apple? I won't answer that. And how about getting it from a potato? So what determines, what constitutes a voltaic cell? Answer, two different metals. Here I have copper and carbon. Here I have carbon and lead, as long as I have two different metals. Now, supposing I have two identical metals, lead and lead, in an acidic solution, in an electrolyte, will I get anything? Answer, no. So the question arises, all the plates in your storage battery are lead plates. How then come we get any electrical energy from a system which is all one metal? Answer, it is not all one metal, because when the battery is charged, some plates become different from other plates, and thus we provide two different kinds of plates. Voltaic cell produces electricity. How else? Wonderful thing. Let me take two different kinds of wires, any two kinds of wires. Whoop, I'm tangled up here. Here is a wire, there's a wire. Let this be copper wire and this iron wire. Let me make the ends in one junction, and let me connect the other ends to a galvanometer, such as we had already. Let me make this junction at one temperature and this one at another temperature. What do we have? A thermocouple, and it produces electric energy. It gives rise to a difference of potential. Proof. Here I have two different wires connected to a 0 centimeter, and here is one of their junctions, and I'm going to warm this junction. I heat it with a match. Watch the needle. Watch it. Do I have to turn that to the... Watch it. There it is. A thermal EMF, an electromotive force due to a difference in temperature of the junctions of the thermocouple. Consider a dry cell with which you're all familiar. Dry cell. I want to write that word on the board. Dry cell. Whoop, whoop, little disaster. Dry cell. I put the dry in quotation marks. Why? The cell is not dry. It has some pasty stuff in it, manganese dioxide and other, which makes it a wet cell, but it's always sealed up tightly on top so as to keep it from oozing out. Now, what constitutes a dry cell? Answer. The central pole is carbon, the positive pole, and the can which holds it all together is zinc, and thus do we not have a voltaic cell made up of two different metals. How else can I produce an electric current? Well, here is something which is absolutely enchanting. In 1831, Michael Faraday, my beloved Faraday, whose grave I visited 2 years ago in London, Michael Faraday discovered the following. Let me have a coil of wire, and let me connect it to a sensitive detecting instrument called a galvanometer. Notice that name, galvanometer, named after Luigi Galvani, who was, in fact, a contestant with Alessandro Volta regarding the nature of electricity. So I have a coil of wire. Let me take a bar magnet, whose polarity is so. Let me thrust it into the coil. Ho-ho! We see the needle move. Let the magnet be at rest. Needle returns to 0. Let me pull it out. Needle deflects the other way. I have an alternating generator. Watch it. Here is a coil of wire, whose ends I have connected to this meter. Here is a bar magnet. Watch the meter. We should see all the system. Notice when the magnet is at rest, there is no change of magnetic flux, and therefore no current arising, no difference of potential. Now let me double the magnets. I doubled them. But if you noticed how they went together, it is obvious that the north pole of one has annulled the south pole of the other, And if they are of equal pole strength, we should get nothing. Watch it. Very feeble. Very feeble. Now let me put them like pole to like pole. Notice they are repelling each other. I'm going to squeeze them together. Now we should get an additive effect. Watch it. Notice it requires motion or change of magnetic flux threading the coil. Or let me take a real strong magnet and use this as a bar magnet. Watch it now. Ho-ho! Notice, no motion, no EMF. Let me move out of the way of that camera. So there I have an alternating generator. Instead, then, of moving a bar magnet in a coil, supposing I had a coil of wire wound on a frame, and I had a handle, and I could turn the coil, and I could encircle that coil with a magnetic field. I would have a magnetoelectric generator. I have one here. There is a coil inside here, which I can turn with a crank. And you notice I get enough difference of potential arising to excite, light, energize an ordinary incandescent house lamp. There it is. Now, I am going to increase the magnetic field that envelops that coil. Here I have a strong Alnico magnet. I'm going to couple the fields. Watch now. Watch the lamp. Ho-ho! The lamp does not light at all. What have I done? Obviously, I have the polarity here annulling the polarity there so that the field is nearly zero. Let me turn this one around. That way. And now watch. Aha! The lamp is brighter. Now that current that I have generated there is an alternating one. Proof. Here is a two-pole lamp. A lamp which fires first on one side and then on the other. Watch it. How many see two things, three things, four things not right? One, the lamp has too high a resistance. Maybe the field isn't strong enough. Or maybe I don't turn fast enough. Oh, there's a little flicker. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. There we are. There we are. And you notice the alternations, which make clear that it is an alternating current generator. Right? Question. Very exciting question for students to contemplate. Supposing I had a vessel, glass, in which I put two different electrodes, say zinc and copper, and I connect them to a galvanometer, and I have an electric current, as we witnessed on this arrangement here with the lemon and the two electrodes. Supposing I had these slabs as big as a barn door, and this vat here as big as the cellar of the Empire State Building. Would I have any greater difference of potential or greater EMF? Answer, no. The two different metals in the electrolyte, which is the same for all our adventures, gives us the same EMF, which suggests the following. Supposing I took one little drop of that electrolyte, one little drop, and I put two little slivers, one zinc and one copper, in that one drop of electrolyte, I would have the same difference of potential there as there. So somebody says, well, why do batteries have to be as big as they are? Answer, longer life-producing energy, or energy-producing life, whichever you want to get at, however you want to get at it. So, of all the means of producing electrical energy, making available electrical energy, chemical is the principal one, but more used throughout the world is this electromagnetic induction of microfaraday, which we call magnetoelectric generation. And I thank you for watching.
the unforgettable Julius Sumner Miller. His ABC series Why Is It So is very well known over here. That Western Californian series, shot in colour in 1969, very much less well known, and there's now a channel on YouTube that's devoted to reproducing the whole of that series. It's well worth looking at. Sumner Miller was an inspirational lecturer who would inspire curiosity. Dramatic lecturer, saw the drama in simple things in everyday life, and I have the tremendous respect for him. He was certainly one of the people that got me interested in science and technology very early on, and I think you can see why. In the mid-60s, early to mid-60s, when programming was difficult to get for, I think, the 9 network, in summer, in the days when there wasn't too much international syndication of programs, and even the connection between Sydney and Melbourne was tenuous following the installation of the coaxial cable between Melbourne and Sydney, allowing syndication between the two capitals. We got a program in summer, usually in the morning, often on weekends, called Summer School of Science. I wonder how many people can remember it. It was hosted by Sydney University's Professor Harry Messel, an American, and featured, I think I saw for the first time through that, Julius Sumner Miller doing some of his physics experiments, including that classic experiment of boiling water in an old kerosene tin until the whole thing was filled with steam, and then putting a cap on the kerosene tin, and you would watch as the steam condensed and the air pressure outside the kerosene tin overcame the lower pressure of the condensing steam inside. The kerosene tin would collapse in on itself. Crunch, crunch, crinkle, crinkle. Always very impressive experiment. One day we tried that at Auburn South Primary School with a Florence flask with disastrous results. The Florence flask, being very thin glass, imploded, and the teacher was decidedly unimpressed, though when we told him what we were trying to imitate, he had a bit of a giggle and said, well done, you've had a successful scientific experiment, now get the dustpan and the broom. So, yeah, Professor Julius Sumner Miller, one of the reasons that, although I'm 68 years old and, of course, not as physically good as I might have been once upon a time, being able to recall people like Sumner Miller is one of the delights of being my age. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. In a few minutes, I'll open up for live QSO via 2 meters. I'll keep it fairly short to about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go to Zoom, because if I leave it for Zoom any longer than that, poor old Rolly, who's watching from Auckland, New Zealand, where it's currently, let me see, 10, 11, 12, it's nearly 4 minutes to 1 a.m. One of these days, if the insomnia doesn't get Rolly, I may be responsible for his early demise. So apologies, Rolly. But it being 10:56, we might as well open up for callback on 147 475, hoping that people will be there. I know Dave Ranson won't be, because he has to be up for a concert tomorrow, him being a very musical type. But again, if you want to look in on video, please do Google the phrase VK3AML 24 September 2022. Okay, so just checking that I've got all of my connections right. I have to change my monitoring to be able to hear off the air, and check the level, that we haven't got excessive level off the 2 meter radio, so that we can stream that onto internet. So this is VK3AML on 147.475 in the Melbourne area. Now calling CQ and seeing who's about for a callback.
VK3ACZ.
Okay, we've only got VK3ACZ initially. G'day, Peter. I think we're seeing you Monday week for the Sherbrooke Radio Club. And I hope the quality of the webcam has improved a little bit since last week. One of our two C930Es met its demise. I don't know what went wrong. It simply ceased to produce pictures. This one, the Brio, shoots at 4K and it runs a little warm. I'm just touching it to see what it was like on the back, and there is a little bit of heat there. So pretty obviously the down conversion from its native 4K to 1080p must be taking up a little bit of processing power. VK3ACZ, how have you been, Pete? VK3AML.
Just left a little pause there. VK3AML, this is VK3ACZ returning. Good evening, Chris. Yes, it's been a good week. First of all, I want to give a shout out to anybody not residing on the moon would know that in Melbourne today, it was, and forgive me if you're very anti-football, but the Geelong Cats won the Australian Football League Grand Final today, and it's a sombre sort of time for me because my dad was a keen Geelong supporter who followed them through thick and thin, and we lost him the year before their first premiership in the 2000s, so it was a kind of a sombre day today. But anyway, all's been good here. The DX has been fantastic. The switch seemed to get flicked on 10 and 15 metres, and there was lots of activity at long last. But we'll talk about your broadcast tonight. First of all, either to relieve you or frustrate you, I'm not too sure which, but I didn't notice any difference with your new camera. That may come as a relief that, no, you didn't have that strange coloured nose you said you have, or maybe others have reported, but I only watch you on my phone screen anyway, so that's the main reason why it didn't make much difference. I saw Tom's video during the week with VK3JR, and I picked up from watching it the first time that he was a white stick operator, but what did jump out at me is I wonder if that was Tuesday, because I worked okay to RZ, or Rusty Zipper as he calls himself, sometimes Yuri, on Tuesday afternoon on 20 as well, so probably the same day. The next thing that jumped out at me was your visit to ZL4RMF shack, good old Ron over there near Dunedin. Interesting that I spoke to him and I mentioned you, and I said that I had seen his shack once before in a video, and he remembered you. He remembered you very well, as if it was yesterday. Described a few things, and it was good to see that. I have a fond memory with Ron there. If you recall the day that we had the earthquake in Melbourne, or the earth tremor, the magnitude 6.1, here was me talking to him on 40 metres, I think it was, trying to get sympathy from him, and there was none forthcoming. Surprise, surprise, because he did say to me that magnitude 6 hardly rated a mention in ZL, and of course it wouldn't. Onto the RF laboratory that AB5N had, man, that had all the bells and whistles, didn't it? I was just, I was amazed at the technology there. I thought it was great. And last but not least, Professor Julius Sumner Miller. Oh boy, Chris, we have the same thoughts about my hero there. Loved as a kid watching his program. Why is it so? First time I've ever seen him in colour. I don't know whether that Cadbury's ad, which one or two people younger than us would remember him from, but I'm sure I didn't see his program in colour ever, and it was just marvellous to see that again. Loved his enthusiasm. It was infectious, and obviously your mind was as curious as mine was about how things were working, and he explained things beautifully. So that was great to see, and I must chase up that. I must chase up the YouTube connection where I can watch some more of his videos. That would be wonderful. Anyway, thanks as always for the broadcast tonight. It's been terrific. I liked the bit of variety. You were right, Professor Julius Sumner Miller changed the tone a bit, and it was all good. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
VK3BLX.
And acknowledging VK3BLX here. Thanks, Peter, and welcome BLX. I thought one of the things I like about running documentary shorts is that they're short, and if you're talking to a generalist audience, even if it's a generalist technical audience as you would have with a ham radio, it's best to keep a variety of stuff running through the night. You don't want to bore anybody and put them off, or excessively run on one theme. So I try to mix it up a little bit, historical material with technical material, and then lighter material. Not that Julius Sumner Miller's stuff was particularly light, but he had an enthusiasm, an ebullience, and a command of the English language that just would get you in, no matter how on the surface boring or technical or scientific or deep a concept might be. He would convert it to simple terms, as with that voltaic cell business, with the differing metals and all of that, and the differing metals to be produced, producing a voltage with the application of heat, a thermocouple, explaining how they work, which is really actually very simple. But I miss that sort of technical programming on television. Unfortunately, as we've got from free-to-air TV on a small number of channels, which concentrates a large number of people into that small number of channels, into the very wide selection of material that we have today, unfortunately there's nothing really of that depth in modern programming. And while we have 40 more channels, it's 40 more copies of crap in many cases, much as I hate to say it. It really needs somebody of Sumner Miller's theatricality to act as an ambassador for science. To some extent I get that with Robin Williams on the Science Show, but he is more on the academic side, less on the theatrical presentation. And I note Tom George talked about the Australian series where he had Anderson, his, if you'll pardon me saying, idiot sidekick. Anderson was the demonstrator who would never say a word, and he would incur the impatient wrath of Sumner Miller on many occasions. Black and white series, ABC. The ABC actually has it on their YouTube channel, many of the episodes of that, Why Is It So? But unfortunately, the ABC, being the litigious sort of organisation that it is, I'm not at liberty to use it for my Saturday night live stream, which is rather sad. The series that I extracted that bit from was actually recorded in California, as you could probably tell because it was in colour at a time when Australia was just producing black and white. We, I think, switched to black and white in late 74 or early 75, and that was recorded in 1969 in California, so it would have been old NTSC Blur-O-Matic colour, but at least it was colour. 53 years ago. Hard to believe, isn't it? Anyway, I'll turn it round to John, VK3BLX. And how are you going this week, John? VK3BLX, VK3AML.
VK3AML in the group, VK3BLX. Yes, good evening, Chris and Peter. Yeah, good. I've had an afternoon of sort of on and off watching football while the rest of the family spent most of their time watching it. I was entertaining grandkids for part of it. The level of jubilation here was quite mixed. My wife, being a very keen Sydney Swans supporter, was rather less than impressed on the performance of her team, but the daughter-in-law was ecstatic because she's a dyed-in-the-wool Cats fan, so mixed emotions here today. Yeah, otherwise, look, I came in very late on your broadcast tonight, unfortunately, Chris. But I got about the last 15 minutes with Professor Julius Sumner Miller, and I'll want to go back and catch the rest of your program later on, perhaps before I go to bed or tomorrow. Sounds like it's quite interesting. I have to come up and say something about Julius Sumner Miller, though, because he too was one of my favourite science communicators when I was when I was a kid, I guess, at school. I'm pretty sure it was showing Why Is It So? With bucket loads of science and sweaty armpits. Nobody could compete with him. The thing I liked about him, and perhaps similar programs from that age, were the fact that guys like Julius Sumner Miller treated everybody like they were intelligent adults. Even the kids that he was dealing with, didn't talk down to them and didn't excessively simplify things. He did leave a certain amount for you to kind of pick up as you went along. And I think that certainly probably works really well with bright kids. He probably didn't try and be everything to everyone. And I think that applied to a number of the documentaries that used to run those days. These days, and I think we were talking about this a week or so ago when we were looking at that clip you had on the development of the transistor by, AT&T, whoever it was, that the documentaries were very concise, laid out well, didn't try to be entertaining, just tried to be informative and did an excellent job at it. And I think really that was Professor Julius Sumner Miller's approach too, that he wasn't there to entertain, he was there to inform, but in a lively fashion. And for anybody who's interested, it was absolutely terrific. And if you weren't interested, well, it wasn't your program anyway. It didn't set out to be infotainment like practically everything on television now is, and even a lot of the stuff on the streaming services and so on. It's pretty hard to find anything that's not just a bit too fluffy. It's a really good look back and see that. A little more recently, perhaps another guy I thought was fantastic was Carl Sagan. So unfortunately, he died all too young, but when it came to talking about cosmology and space exploration, he was fantastic, really quite inspiring. We could go on and on. Who else is there now? Neil deGrasse Tyson is, I suppose, perhaps someone who's a little bit in the same realm. Also, the American guy with the Japanese name forgets me at the moment. I forget it at the moment, but he's also been quite good. Anyway, fascinating stuff, and thanks for taking the trouble to put together, Chris. Great. VK3AML in the group, VK3BLX.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just took a pause there in case anybody wanted to call in. As a matter of interest, with the ABC, I worked in the ABC in radio talks and documentaries 1978, 79, 80, before switching to researching for film documentaries for Film Australia in Sydney, Linfield. And when I worked at the ABC, it was before it became the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. It was a government commission. It had a commission to provide material that the commercials either couldn't or wouldn't provide that was in the public interest in many cases. And I was continually told when I was working, for example, I worked for about 6 months on a documentary series on radio, interviewing all of the people who had been involved 50 years earlier in 1928 with the introduction of the first talking pictures to cinema in Australia. I think the first theatre that went on with the jazz singer in Sydney was December 28, 1928, and Melbourne followed with a switching to sound of a couple of theatres, followed by many, many more, of course, in February 1929. Anyway, it was fascinating interviewing all these people, and I could go in those days on the ABC into considerable technical depth, talking about horn-loaded loudspeakers for the very poor output of audio amplifiers of that time, which typically were only 10 watts, although they took up a whole 19.5-inch rack. 10 watts was about the best they could do. So to provide enough sound in a theatre, the most of the earliest talking picture reproducing systems used massive folded horns on horn drivers to get the acoustic efficiency high enough to fill the theatre, of course at the expense of frequency response. Not too much above 4K, not too much below 100 Hertz. And in those days I could do it on the ABC because, as the management kept telling us at shop floor level, we are not here to chase ratings. That's the job of the commercials selling soap. We are here to form a useful community function which the commercials cannot or will not provide. Now, unfortunately in my opinion, the ABC went over to becoming a commercial corporation in, I think, 1983 or thereabouts. And ever since then, most of the ABC at shop floor level has been occupied by people with commercial radio or television experience who are always chasing ratings, I think to the detriment of the intellectual level of what's produced. Doesn't apply to the ABC as much as it applies to commercial radio or television, but I've often said to friends working in the ABC, I greatly support the idea of a Commonwealth government broadcasting organisation, particularly in news, to be free of any influence from the advertising dollar and advertisers. But when you start chasing ratings, it makes it less justifiable to have you doing the sort of material you produce, because you are simply duplicating what the commercials are already doing. So it's a double-edged sword. If you want to go for ratings, you're not providing a community service that you would otherwise have been providing. And that's probably stepping slightly into political territory, so I better hand it back to Peter. Save me, Pete. With a pause for any other breakers, VK3ACZ and the group, VK3AML.
VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ, and good evening to you, John. Good to have you along. I think the closest we can... Oh, by the way, your comments about the ABC are all noted and for the most part agreed with. For the rest of it, you're telling me stuff that I didn't know, but or at least in the history of things. But yeah, crying shame in a way. I think the closest we got, Chris, is Dr. Carl... I don't know if I should try to pronounce his surname. I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, we all know who Dr. Carl is. Well, everybody in Australia knows who Dr. Carl is. I note at the moment that his only real media presence, is that I'm aware of is on. He's been on TV from time to time, but it's Thursday lunchtimes on what do they call it? Triple J. He has a question and answer segment for an hour. Always good to listen to. I think it's from 11 until 12 on Thursdays. Wish there was more of it, but of course nobody with the razzmatazz and the impetus and the power and persuasion of Professor Julia Sumner Miller, though. That was fantastic. Anyway, just one other comment for this over, Chris. There was a bit of troppo around during the week. I wonder if you were aware of that at all. I was getting into the 7 REC on table cape on 70 centimetres, which is always very nice when that happens. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
I wasn't terribly aware of that, Pete. This has been quite a dramatic week for my family. Prue has had a series of spinal scans for the spinal operation she had back in February, and it turns out that she had a fall in hospital, which we thought, in rehab, which we thought nothing of at the time, but of course she was under considerable sedation and wouldn't have noticed it, but she managed to fracture her sacrum, the lowest vertebra of all in the back, where the vertebrae connect with the pelvis. and she's very lucky not to be paraplegic as a result. We didn't know about that break. It explains a lot of the slowness of her recovery. So it came as a bit of a shock to hear that as a result of the scan that she had. And as a consequence, she's been put into a back brace. I don't know whether it'll be much long-term help, but it's to splint that fracture in case there's any more healing to be done. We're not quite sure exactly when the fracture occurred. So it's been drama in the family with Prue in that condition. So I haven't done all that much radio apart from tracking down video clips to put onto this Saturday night session, to tell the truth. And Tom George says it's Dr. Karl Kruzelnicki. I think that's a Polish name. I wouldn't know how to spell it, but I know how it's spoken. And Tom George also says Secret Life of Machines, Tim Hunkin, Rex Garrett. Tim has a YouTube channel, which is worth looking at as well. And I think you're thinking of the chap with a Japanese name. Was it Paul Suzuki? I'm not sure, but he's certainly a science and climate change ambassador. As for the Troppo, there's a clip that I may play next week which has to do with Troppo and sporadic E on 6 meters, that talks about weather interactions with sporadic E. Surprisingly, there are weather interactions with sporadic E. I would have thought that it was totally solar, but a lot of it has to do with wind currents, up and down, vertical currents, apparently, and there's been some research in that, which I'll do more of. But next week I'll be running a lot more on science and scientists, famous scientists of the past. I've managed to find a clip which may be of interest to our New Zealand friends. Lord Rutherford, born in Nelson in New Zealand, one of the architects of the nuclear age, but apart from that, he was also the person on whom Marconi's magnetic detector was based. His work on the theory of magnetism was the basis of the magnetic detector, which was the standard marine radio receiving detector of the period 1905 to about 1915, driven by clockwork. There's one at Motat, Rowley. You probably are aware of it. 2 reels with an iron wire running round between the 2 reels that very slowly turn. There's an RF antenna coil wound around the iron wire and a couple of horseshoe magnets so that the iron wire is partly magnetized. As it goes through the RF field demagnetizes the wire to varying extents depending on the strength of the RF. And on a secondary coil running to a pair of low impedance headphones, you hear the demodulated audio. It's an interesting detector, which I don't think there's been anything quite like it since the days when Marconi used it, but they found that galena crystals were a lot more sensitive, apparently. Round to John, VK3BLX. I'll take a final round on this band, and then at 11:30 we'll go to Zoom, or try to go to Zoom. VK3BLX and the group, VK3AML.
VK3AML and the group, VK3BLX. Yes, thanks, Chris. Look, not a lot to add. Yeah, I think it was David Suzuki was the scientist I had in mind. So, yes, adding him to the list of people who are doing their best to get some truth and logic into the climate debate over all the background noise. And I might just leave you at this point and tootle off and put the telly on and get the YouTube up and watch the first part of your program, which I missed. And looking forward to next week's, by the sound of it. Funny you should mention Lord Rutherford. Some time ago I saw a clip. I think it was, I've got a funny feeling it was Clint, 3CSJ, put it up one night after his Astronomical Society broadcast, maybe about a year ago or something. And it was probably one of Lord Rutherford's later lectures in his career where he was pitching it rather like a Julius Sumner Miller one. It was, I think, gathered it was some sort of an annual public lecture where he was showing the transmission of information through all sorts of different media he had set up on the lecture theatre bench, electrical and light and acoustic and all the rest of it, all sort of running in series, as I recall. It was quite fascinating. So it should be interesting. I'll make a concerted effort to get to and have a look. All right, Ben. Cheers to all, and catch you next week. See you, Chris and Peter, VK3AML and the group VK3BLX.
Thanks, John. Well, I'll hand it round to Peter for a final before we attempt the dreaded Zoom, and I'll be streaming the Zoom via the Brio camera, so I have to get it off its stand and onto this tripod that's on my right. If people would like to look in on all of this, we'll be live streaming publicly on YouTube live stream. Google the phrase VK3AML 24 September 2022 and you should get us. Now, I should make one announcement here. Been brought to my attention that there's an elderly hothead in one of the radio societies. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can, who's been criticising the Saturday night transmissions, saying, oh, they're illegal. Not only is he breaching copyright, and that's not true. Having worked in film archives, broadcast organisations most of my life, I know everything there is to know about the Australian Copyright Act, and I know exactly what I can and can't use. But apart from that, he criticised me because, oh, he's broadcasting on ham radio. You can't have broadcasts on ham radio, says this old coot. To which I say, I've got this little button here, to which I say... No. There we go. I've been hoping to use this button for a very long time. If he wants to say that this broadcast is illegal, he then has to say that the Wireless Institute's weekly news broadcast is illegal, and the Radio Amateur Old Timers Club's broadcasts are illegal, and the VK3ASE Saturday night transmissions for the last 40 years were illegal, and VK3SL's Friday night transmissions on 160 metres and 70 centimetres are illegal, and the RASA broadcast is illegal, and the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania and News West broadcasts are illegal, and Amateur Radio New South Wales from Dural, and Hayden VK7HH, and the Australian Radio and Experimenters Group of South Australia, and WANZARC, and the West Lakes Amateur Radio Club. My friend, if you're watching, I am bound by the same regulations that all of those organisations and individuals have been bound by since the invention of the Radio Communications Act of 1995 and amendments. We are not under the Wireless Telegraphy Act anymore. When will people get it right? I'll hand it back to you for a final, Peter, but I really wanted to make that statement. VK3ACZ and the group VK3AML.
VK3AML in the diminishing group, VK3ACZ 73, John, and look forward to hearing you next week. Well, you covered up the list of every illegal operator there is there, Chris. You've shut everybody down. Oh dear. No, you can be assured that person would be listening, because I'm fairly convinced that he would need to find something to be offended about. And the more successful and more interesting your broadcasts are, and the more people you get watching, the more he'll be incensed. And it's sorry that you have that kind of opposition, but it's really it's easy for me to say because I'm not the one in the firing line, but that's the sort of stuff we need to file in that, push the button and file it in that device that goes down to Werribee. Oh dear. But a good response on your part. Some people do want portholes on their coffins, and I don't know what we can do about it. And just last word on all this, the SDR radio. I'm just wondering, Chris, if reviewing all that stuff and watching it for yourself made you even more convinced it's time to get that SDR radio that you've been drooling over for some time. Looking forward to it, and I'll be looking forward to next week's broadcast too. Yes, sporadic E is an interesting one, as I understand it, having read everything I possibly could on the subject. The chief suspects are meteors, upper atmosphere wind shears, and lightning, and maybe some of all of those, who knows. I just know it's a lot of fun when it happens, and I love the bedlam that breaks out when the sporadic E starts. We had a bit of it on Sunday afternoon, Chris. I got a contact into Vanuatu. A VK4 was over there on a little safari, whatever he was doing, and at the same time Perth was coming in on 10 metres as well. Classic sporadic E2 because it suddenly disappeared. But anyway, yeah, the season isn't too far away. And best wishes to Prue too. I'm not pleased to hear that that's an issue for you both at the moment, something you'll be both struggling with. Can't say enough how I hope it all works out all right. Back to you, Chris, and looking forward to having an attempt at joining you on Zoom. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Okay, Pete, I've got to move the webcam. So we take it off that mount. He said hitting his microphone, and we put it on this mount. If I can find the hole, said the girl to the sailor. And then we align this with the screen. Stop it keystoning. Raise it a bit. Now, the people watching on the screen should be able to read if they can see the meeting ID. I'll type the passcode and the meeting ID up. Meeting ID 894 4159 4524. And why didn't that type? Meeting ID, I'll try it again, 894 4159 4254. Just check that that's right. And the passcode (1Q), I think it's 0, so 0. SM capital Q. Okay, now I've put the passcode and the meeting ID up on the for the Zoom meeting up. If anybody cares to join us on Zoom, we should be able to get them. VK3GLC we've got. And just hang on a sec, I'll switch to the other screen. There we go. Wonder if switching that light off helps it. There's a bit of glare. Hang on. Levels low.
No problems.
Oh, got him.
Yeah, my link might be a bit slow, so you might not get video, Chris. It's
okay.
Tom.
Hang on. Oh, g'day. G'day, Gary, and g'day, Tom.
Yeah, g'day.
Now, we've got reasonable quality there. I'm just trying to work out where our screen glare is coming from. Which light source? Where? Oh, it's probably the top one up there. Hang on, I'll switch a few things off. That's a bit better. The trouble is we're in the dark. That's a little better, I think. Gary's a bit washed out, but...
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't do much about that. Please do not adjust your set. I look like...
There we go.
How are things in Ballarat, Tom?
Very good, thanks, Chris. Just a couple of things. I put to the committee meeting the other night about you popping up on one of your net nights that you talk with Slow Scan and EasyPal.
Oh.
And that's gone down very well, actually.
Oh, all right.
And the other thing is VK3BA sent an email to the committee suggesting that your talkback of a Saturday night possibly be popped through RBA as well.
I'm not enthusiastic to see it go through a repeater because you're likely to get people to complain, just as I find people complaining here. Hello to Clint. Clint, it must be 4 o'clock in the morning. G'day. He's in Salt Lake City, of all places.
And he's muted
Peter.
too.
Clint, how have you been? It's been a long time. And we're not...
I'm fine. I'd say I'm just muting the normal live YouTube stream. Yeah, it's actually 7:30 here.
7:30 in the morning. Okay.
Yeah. You seem on a bit later than you normally are.
Well, with Zoom, I roll it in after we have a bit of a talk on 2 meters in Melbourne, as you might have gathered. Do you watch this often?
I usually watch the replay somewhere at some point, but not live.
And there's Rolly. I'll just point to him. He's in Auckland, where it's currently 11, 12. It's 1:34 a.m. in Auckland. Poor man. Rolly has been to the subantarctic islands, Clint. He's quite an adventurer. So don't let the bald head fool you. He's been on many an expedition to uninhabited islands, including the Kermadec in the Pacific, and where else? Papua New Guinea, isn't it, Rolly? Can you hear me, Rolly? We can't hear you. I think your mic's muted.
Unmute. There you go. How you going?
Oh, very good. Very good. Sorry to keep you up, Rolly.
No, you're not keeping me up at all. I've just been working a truckload of DX on 80 metres into the States. I mean, it's just been romping, and Joe. 100 watts into an in-fed wire, and I'm working States on 80 metres. How about that?
Oh, look, we can envy you people in New Zealand because you've got from 3.7 watt to 3.9, whereas our 80 metre bands, we don't have any 75 metres here. Our 80 metres cuts out at 3.7 megs.
Yeah, we can go from daylight to dark, so no problem.
Yeah, and you got 30 kilohertz worth of low frequencies too, haven't you, got over there?
Yeah, but you guys can go single sideband on 30 metres too, can't you?
Well, yes, that's something that I don't think can happen in America. Clint,
can't happen anywhere else in the world. Only in Australia.
While we've got Clint online, Clint is one of the people in charge of that wonderful web SDR that's based in northern Utah. In the middle of nowhere, they've got an enormous log periodic antenna up at about 150, 200 feet.
No, we have 2 of them, but the wire one's about 94 feet, and the beam is at about 80 feet, and we just added another beam pointed in you guys' direction at about 55 feet.
Okay, and you took over a site that had been for observation purposes by the CIA or something, hadn't you?
Well, we don't know the exact history, but more recently it had been used for a chirp sounder.
Right.
In the 90s and into the mid 2000s.
Right.
So.
And how is that going? I noticed that there used to be 2 receivers available. There was 1 last time I looked.
No, there's I don't know how many receivers there are. There are 30 some odd.
Oh, okay.
I mean we have 6 Kiwis.
Right.
Running.
Yeah.
And then 5 servers, each with at least 6 bands on them.
Gosh.
So that's So I mean, I'd have to enumerate it. I don't know how many band receivers we have now.
Right. It's certainly an interesting one. You can hear a sparrow fart in Europe on that thing. It's just incredible. Do you find very many users using it? In the weekends we've recently seen north of 200 people on it at a time. Whoa.
So,
okay.
So it is used. Yeah. Especially since KFS has internet issues. Their ISP is not insisting that their internet is working properly, but anyone using it can tell that that's not true.
Yeah. The KFS is the one on the Pacific coast, isn't it?
Yeah, at Half Moon Bay, yes.
There's another one at Point Reyes, north of San Francisco.
There's only a Kiwi there. There are only Kiwis there.
Right.
But it's possible one day we could get a web SDR there. That actually has fewer noise issues. KFS, they have a bad feed line from one of the main antennas, and they also agree to put a cell site on site. So there's switching supply noise everywhere.
Right.
Between the bad coax and that, it's degraded a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, we do the best we can.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, we seem to have got some sort of a following going with these Saturday night sessions, although it's, wee hours of Saturday morning there, 7 o'clock or something.
Yeah, 7:39.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit up earlier than usual. I had a booster for shingles, and my body's just aching, so I woke up a bit earlier than normal.
Sorry to hear.
Also, I had a flu shot in the other arm too. So between those two, if you're going to get hit, you might as well get hit by a big hammer, right?
Yes. And Rolly, there used to be a web SDR that was extremely good. I think one of the best in Australasia, running out of the Bay of Islands north of you. What exactly happened to that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it got a little bit messy with the politics on that one. However, if you really want to have a really good SDR here in New Zealand, it's called the Maharau, MAHARAU SDR.
Right.
And you'll hear anything and everything around New Zealand on that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one out of in Rotorua.
Yep.
And then another one in Wanganui.
Right. The one in Rotorua I've actually dialed up. My friend Dave, VK3ASP, who went with us to Deal Island, we did the light beam stuff across Tasmania, Victoria. He used to run the Saturday night sessions that I'm now running, but without the video that I'm attempting.
Right.
And he finally got jack of all of the criticism that he was getting. Radio Australia had closed down, leaving about 10 or 15 different HF frequencies completely up for grabs. So Dave had worked for the ABC, which runs Radio Australia, and was rather jack of all of the excuses being used for closing it down. So he went into the Australian Communications and Media Authority and said, which of Radio Australia's frequencies are available to me and how much do you want for them? And he was basically told, we can't get rid of HF frequencies. Which ones do you want? And he said, well, 4835 and 2310 would be pretty good. So he got them. Then he asked, how much would you want for them? And they said $100. So now he's moved north of Bendigo in rural Victoria, and he's actually running the shortwave station that he calls, instead of Radio Australia, he calls it Shortwave Australia. And he's basically doing the same thing.
obviously, it was a shortwave frequency, not an FM frequency.
Well, 4835 is he's running 100 watts on a north-south dipole and 100 watts on an east-west dipole, both from the same VFO. So he has fairly good omni coverage there for southeastern Australia. But I heard him strength 8. Quite listenable on the Rotorua web SDR, so he's getting across into your part of the world too. Depends.
Yeah, I listen to that Rotorua SDR occasionally too. I do some of my own audio tests on that one, on 80 and 40, which, by the way, I'm jealous of you, Rolly. I've only been to the States once on 80 metres to Arizona. In fact, I think I might unplug here and start working 80. No, I won't.
Right, yeah. I just came off 58 on 80s, and let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 12 different states. That's states, not QSOs.
Whoa.
12 different states tonight on 80 metres.
What sort of antenna are you running on 80?
You really want to tell me? You really want me to tell you?
Why? Is it illegal?
No, it's not. No, it's it's like a phased vertical. In other words, there's a quarter wave vertical with a reflector behind it.
Hang on.
And
are you on a broadcast station site or something?
No, this is just in my local property. But the quarter wave vertical, the driven element is loaded at the top, so it's quite a bit shorter.
Okay.
And then the reflector at the back of it is right on the other end of the section, and it just happens to be in the right place, a quarter wavelength away from, and happens to be exactly in the right place, so it acts as a reflector for straight into the States. Okay. Now that's what I use on transmit. But on receive, I'm using a ground loop antenna.
Ah, okay.
So the loop, it's a big loop. It's about 90 metres long.
Are we talking a horizontal loop?
No, yeah, horizontal loop on the ground. In fact, well over, I just had a look at it this afternoon, well over 50% of it's under the ground now.
Oh, okay. How does that work?
Very well.
Ask a silly question. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Put it this way, it's nothing to write home about as far as signal strength. So you have to have a 20 dB preamp to bring the signal up, but you get no noise on it. Absolutely no noise. So I'm not worried about the lack of signal strength. It's the signal to noise that I'm more interested in.
Okay.
So if I can get rid of the noise, it's easy enough to boost the signal, but just by putting in fact, with the 7300 now, I've actually taken out that auxiliary preamp because it was actually causing noise in itself.
Yeah, I've noticed that running an inverted L, say on 160 metres, excellent transmitting antenna, no problem at all. But for receiving, anything that requires a ground radial seems to pick up an awful lot of extraneous noise from other sources, and it strikes me.
That's a problem with see, noise is inherently vertically polarized, isn't it? Anyway, anything that say like ignition noise, most inverter noise and so on like that is vertically polarized, and if you're going to use a predominantly vertically polarized antenna, then you're actually that's best of all worlds as far as the antenna is concerned.
Probably
but
the best
good,
I could improve it probably by using a multi-turn receiving loop for 160 metres and then somehow switching between the two. Hello, Terry. How are you going?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, fine. Absolutely fine. And you'll see we've got now we've gone multi-continent tonight. We've got Clint from Salt Lake City in USA. We've got Rolly from Auckland. Peter from as far away as Baronia. And GLC. You're at Ringwood, I think, aren't you?
No, I'm at Roval.
Roval, okay.
Yeah.
So Terry...
near Baronia.
Terry down the bottom is from across the other side of Port Phillip Bay, so we've got a fair spread of people on tonight.
Oh, that's good.
I noticed, Terry, you were running a LIME SDR. So was that lecture actually about the particular unit that you've got?
It's the exact unit, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that's the exact one.
Yeah. You've had good results?
Yeah, it works well.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just having problems with amplifiers and stuff at the moment, that's all. But other than that, yeah, it's going well.
Okay, great stuff. Okay.
But I've got the LNAs built. I've got the filters built. I've got most of the stuff. I've got it transmitting on VHF, but not on HF yet.
Right.
But yeah, it will transmit low signal on HF, but I just haven't got it doing a high signal yet.
Okay.
So yeah, it shouldn't be too far off the...
When you say low signal, what, 5 watts or something? Or?
No, it's only 30 milliamps at the moment.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's got to go through its pre-drive and then its final, so out into a PA.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be sorted. It's just a matter of, I've got the boards there, it's just a matter of mounting the boards and mounting everything in.
And the graphic interface is pretty good, all the rest of it?
Yeah, I'm running an i7 into it, so...
Oh.
It's a $2,500 computer, so yeah, it seems to be working all right.
Great stuff, yeah.
So yeah, it's an i7 from Coffee Lake, I think they call it.
Yeah, Terry is one of the members of, as is Gary 3GLC, are members of our EasyPal digital slow scan group, so that we've all done a bit of looking at each other's equipment via digital slow scan. We have a Thursday night net on 2 meters where we transmit this stuff. Incidentally, Clint, one of the latest things that's happened here with this digital slow scan is that there's a new picture compression format which no doubt you've heard of, called AVIF file. And let's say you have an AVIF picture file of 50K size. It looks like a JPEG file of 4 times that size. I don't know what they're doing. It requires a lot of processing time to actually produce the AVIF from the JPEG. So there must be some incredible number crunching going on. But whatever it is, it makes it very much easier to transmit those images via a modem like EasyPal. There must be, we've all been thinking though, there must be some much faster modem than cranky old EasyPal designed for HF when you're using a VHF FM path or something like that.
Yeah, I would think so. I need to leave shortly, but I didn't catch your earlier one, but I guess you are aware that the Kiwi SDR is out of production.
Oh, now. Okay.
Yeah, so you won't, unless somebody gets one second hand or finds the remaining stock, they will slowly start disappearing from the face of the earth.
Oh dear.
Same as LIME SDR.
Well,
LIME SDR, the same thing.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm involved with the Whisper Demon project, which it's, as you can imagine, receives whisper signals from around the world and all that, and goes to a database, and it's actually used for scientific endeavors, study of propagation, and more recently they've added features to allow the measurement of Doppler shift, so that we can actually see we're actually able to get an idea of the velocity of the change of the path length. Okay. Which tells you, supposedly can tell you even more. But I need to get out of here. Another reason why I got up
just
early
a final question for you, Clint. I did notice that as you increase the number of subcarriers in OFDM on HF, it becomes less and less possible to resolve those individual carriers. Is it Doppler shift due to ionospheric movement that causes that, or what?
Well, I mean, if you're putting a quart of crap in a half-liter jar, I mean, things don't work as well.
Right.
But what it is closer symbol rates, and closer carriers, more intersymbol interference is the problem that you have, and that based on timing and above all timing. So yeah, the more data you put in there, more the fragile it becomes. I mean, it's just Nyquist theory.
Yeah.
You need X number of CV. Yeah,
you need that Ferranti radio with magnoscopic tuning.
There you go.
Did you see the 1936 vintage?
I haven't seen it yet. I'll watch it on replay. But anyway, yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do. There's the so-called Shannon limit, where below which a modem you cannot recover data anymore, I do know that on satellite links they can get within close to a dB, but that limit's constant. But on HF, it's variable and unknown.
Yeah.
And depends and varies for everybody receiving. So you just kind of have to, shoot as many pellets as you can and hope that they hit something at the far end. So
yeah, hit or miss. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely to see you anyway, Clint. It's been quite a while.
All right, I'm gonna bail out. I need to get going. We have a swap meet about 50 miles south of here.
I'm glad to see that you've still got a good sense of values then.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. We'll see you.
All the best.
Cheers, Clint. Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Clint's a very interesting one. He a brilliant engineer. When we did our 108-mile modulated light in 2005 from Mount Wellington outside Hobart to Mount Barrow in northern Tasmania, Clint had been working on a similar optical system to us, and he managed to pull off the next world record, which was the Utah people have an incredible advantage in that respect because they've got 10,000-foot mountains, almost twice the height of the highest mountain in Australia, either side of the Bonneville Salt Flats. And you can't get a better line of sight path than that. So I think he managed to do 175 miles, which is at the moment the world DX record for modulated light both ways. And we just don't have any paths that long. So unless I can devise a system to scatter modulated light off clouds on the horizon, I don't think we're going to do any better than Clint has already. Brilliant guy. You should see his website, KA7OEI. You look him up, you'll find him very easily. Anyway, it's great to see him on. I hadn't seen him for about 12 months. What have you been up to, Gary, apart from riding your motorcycle around the place?
Yeah, well, I haven't been riding that around much lately. Been busy doing other things, getting stuff loaded into the truck. I've had the thing for, over 12 months now, and it's the first things I got done was the bull bar and the canopy. I've only just got decent tyres on it because the trip up to the Wombat State Forest and Dalesford a couple of weeks ago reminded me, oh shit, I'm on road tyres. So could have got myself into a few interesting situations. So we've got that rectified.
Did you take radio gear?
No, I didn't. Because I haven't got it in there yet. I've just got the antennas mounted this week, and I've also got a pair of bunny burners on the front that'll hopefully light up the road ahead a little bit better, and maybe a light bar to go up on one of the roof bars. But
I've seen those. If you had any more wattage there, you'd probably set the place on fire as you went through.
Yeah, and Parks and Wildlife don't like that too much, apparently. But no, I'm mainly fiddling around with that. I got some Christmas lights to modify for a friend of the family also. So, that's been gathering bits and pieces for that. I will make one comment though. I was quite surprised that Mr. OCZ there hasn't got himself an ANAN SDR yet. I suppose he's going to go down and see Ross on Monday and come out one under his arm. He's got everything else there.
No, I went to his shop a couple of weeks ago just to get a $9 connector and came home with an IC705.
Well, it sounds like a fair deal to me.
One thing I managed to
one
score
way of getting
something
the connector, I guess.
Sorry. Go ahead, Rolly.
There's one way of getting a connector, I guess.
Yeah, well, it was very good because the very next day I took it out and I had some fantastic contacts on the long path to Europe on 20 metres with 5 watts, so very happy with it.
I should mention that Peter is one of the few people I know who collects Baofengs in every conceivable colour. How many different ones have you got now?
I'm too ashamed to say.
Have you got one of the 5,000 kilometre ones?
What's a 5,000?
Oh, don't put any more ideas in my head.
No, there's a 10,000 kilometre one now, isn't there?
Oh, the 1,500
It can quite
watt
easily be. Yeah, and the 15,000 milliwatt battery.
Oh, I see. Okay.
A 32-day standby. As long as you got it turned off.
That mob through AliExpress have a fantastic marketing group.
Yeah, well,
they're right on the product, aren't they?
don't Baofeng have a software-defined transceiver now, or something similar, or was that some other Chinese company? I had an idea somebody in China was producing a cheap software-defined radio for about $300 or something. Has anybody heard about that?
That's Retrovis.
Retrovis, okay.
Yeah, it's not 300. It's about 400 American, which stands out about 700 ours.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So yeah, it's sort of up there.
Yeah. I've just been waiting for the exchange rate to come down a bit, so that I can get better access to the ANAN. But as you may have gathered from my enthusiastic inclusion of the material on that, I think that would future-proof me quite well if I got hold of one of those. I mean, I'm 68, maybe I have another 10, 20 years. I think an ANAN would be a good centre for the, core for the development of a shack. I'm capable of building a linear, that's sort of agricultural, but when it comes to surface mount, it freaks me out no end. You've got no idea. As soon as I see surface mount...
The thing about SDR, though, Chris, is as the eyesight goes, you just keep getting bigger and bigger screens.
Yeah, well, it'll end up with a screen half the size of a wall and me with magnifying glass, bottle-thick glasses or something. But I just like the idea of controlling everything from a mouse on a screen. I've been so used to doing it. I mean, I find myself using a web SDR more than I use the FRG 7700 these days, because at least you can tell where the best web SDR locations are in terms of sig to noise. That one in northern South Australia at Tralee, or whatever it's called, is just superb.
5ARG.
Yeah, I had the most extraordinary experience one morning. I got up at about, would have been 3 o'clock in the morning Melbourne time. I had insomnia, as occasionally hits me, indigestion or something. And I tuned to 160 metres and I could hear quite clearly what obviously was a very distant station. And they turned out to be in Lithuania. And there was another station there later in Latvia. I recorded them because I'd never heard 160 metres working over that distance before. But they were about strength 6 or 7. I just couldn't believe it. It was like hearing something from about 200 kilometres away, and it was on the other side of the world. I can only assume that it's grey line propagation or something like that coming into play. It was in midsummer, by the way. So you tell me, we'll both know. But that receiver was just exceptional. Unless somebody was picking it up in South Australia and rebroadcasting it somehow. Yeah. Anyway. Anybody got any good projects on the go? Tom, maybe, in Ballarat?
Not at the moment, Chris, although I've got an MST HF rig from OzQRP that I'm putting together. I've finally got the VFO that goes with it. I've just got to get me bum off the seat and put it all together. I've even got the proper crimping gun for the connectors that plugs into the board. So I've even got the plastic chassis for it. Okay. I'm thinking of rearranging the bedroom cum shack at the moment to give myself a bit more elbow room. So that might happen first, but that's what I've got on the run.
Do you have reasonable room for an antenna there? Is Ballarat reasonably quiet in that respect?
I live in which means I could probably put up about 30 feet of long wire.
Okay. From
my bedroom window across the backyard, and that's about it.
Okay.
So I've got a bits and pieces to make up a tapped toroid transformer, so I can put it up near the window where I'd bring the long wire in and then do some adaptation from there. Okay. But the main job at the moment is sort of trying to rearrange the junk so I've got a bit more space.
Okay. I just got the notification that we've got 10 minutes left, by the way, so if we disappear suddenly, you'll know what's happened. Anyway, Terry, any projects at your end?
No, mate. No, all quiet at the moment.
Okay.
Just a few things with the SDR, and it's just really, I don't know, sort of at a stalemate at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've got the next Easy Pal session on Thursday. I'll probably have a communication with you about that at that stage. Have you been seeing the AVIF files that we've been getting through?
Yeah, I have been, but I haven't got no antenna still. I'm just waiting on people to get the stuff that we need to go up and do it. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yours blew down or something, didn't it? I think.
Yeah, it come down in the windstorm we had a couple of Sundays back.
Yeah.
About 4 Sundays ago.
Yes.
Yeah, so I lost a 3-metre mast off the roof and
Ooh. Okay.
2 stories up. So it's on the top of a 2-story house, and it wasn't.
Yeah. Right.
Wasn't too. Things weren't too happy made around here. So antennas laying across the roof at the moment. It's not going anywhere, but it's just laying there.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with the fixing up. If you need me to come over and help with it, let me know.
It's all good, mate. It's all good. I've got somebody else coming out to do it. So they got to sort it out. So I'm just waiting on them.
Yeah. It's a pity we're sort of diametrically over the other side of town. Yeah.
It's all good, mate. It's all good. But I will be back on soon. But I am listening via net and
Okay.
Yeah.
The wall's heavy.
And watching the feeds come through on the internet as well. So.
Okay. What about you?
It's looking good.
What about you, Rolly? What sort of do they have a fairly strong NZART group in your area that you're involved with?
Not really, although I do, you've been involved or you've gone down to Music Point, haven't you,
Yep.
Chris?
Yep.
Involved in that a little bit because many years ago I actually operated there on the old pounding of the CW, so I've been trying to get some of the old transmitters restored and get those going, so that's been a little bit of an interest. Other than that, I've been involved in doing Parks on Air quite a bit over the last little while. So.
Okay, I haven't had much involvement with the radio scene in Auckland, but when Mike 7MJ and I toured New Zealand a couple of occasions, we called in at we had a meet and greet with the Christchurch boys, Murray Healy, ZL4RMF, and a group from there. But the group that we really were welcomed to with open arms was McAndrews Street in Dunedin. Very active group considering how small the population is down there. It's extraordinarily enthusiastic. They have their own meeting rooms at the back of a sort of a garage arrangement, very large meeting rooms actually. And we did some visits to ZL4LV, Peter, who was a former chief engineer for Dunedin TV, and of course to Ron, ZL4RMF, and it was an interesting contrast. Peter's place was full of older gear, and I mean FULL, floor to ceiling, whereas Ron has reduced everything down to a single digital shack, which is disturbingly clean and disturbingly neat, because he just doesn't need all the bits and pieces that we normally. I mean, look behind me here, and you'll see some of the mess, including an Edison phonograph that I don't normally put on camera. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, and the further south you go and the more isolated it gets in New Zealand, it seems that the amateur groups there are more enthusiastic. Even in
that's fair comment.
In Invercargill, particularly ZL4OM, who showed us around the Ararua Radio Museum. I've stayed in contact with him via Facebook, and he's become a good friend. He's just bought himself a section, would you believe, in Bluff, of all places. I mean, Bluff to me looks like a deserted whaling station, which is probably what it is.
You're right. One step further and you're into the deep waters of the south, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I saw it in midsummer, and it was like midwinter in Melbourne. I can't imagine what winter down there is like. It's effectively
Yeah, pretty dismal, that's for sure.
Yes, yes, very windy. Anyway, we're going to lose people at any moment. Does anybody have anything final they'd like to say? Tom? No, you're right. Peter? No? I can't get any of you to talk. I think
another good night, Chris. Another really good one.
Okay.
And great content.
Thanks.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. Good stuff.
I try to vary it a bit so that if anybody's bored, they won't be bored in 10 minutes' time. That's the theory behind it. And I try to mix the historic stuff with stuff that's a bit newer. But the historic stuff is easier to use because it's not going to be in bloody copyright. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is a good program tonight, Chris. Very interesting indeed. And yeah, some of those old guys. I remember that guy that does all the physics and so on.
Oh, Julius Sumner Miller. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember him as a kid. Just sort of being fascinated with various bits and pieces.
You got him over there as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
then
good.
ripping out into the backyard and trying some of the things that much to my father's annoyance. Trying
some of them were pretty
myself.
dangerous. I mean, gosh. The thing that I found looking him up on internet was that apparently during the Depression, when he was in his 20s, he was reduced to working as a butler for a doctor, and he was working as a butler, a gentleman's gentleman. Can you believe that sort of a person being a butler? While he was studying for his PhD. I think he was a dual PhD or something. Very brilliant man. Certainly had enough ego to carry himself along, as you could probably tell.
Well, he'd have McDonald's to work at today.
I got into awful trouble with my dad because I had some 278 records.
Yep.
Which to make a Wimshurst machine, which I saw on that, but I didn't have any. How do you make the brass shim? I found some brass shim in Dad's workshop, but that was shim that they use for adjusting the tappets on cars in the old days. There was
and fairly expensive at that.
Fairly expensive. Here's me, I was cutting it all up and making all these
little segments for the disc.
Yeah, then getting a hot soldering iron and melting it into the vinyl of the record and made this jolly Wimshurst machine. And
did you get sparks out of it?
Oh, you'll say. Don't overestimate or underestimate what you can get out of a couple of records and this thing whirling around. But because I found that the faster you made it whirl, so that works. Let's put instead of me whirling it around, let's put a little machine, a motor onto this thing, and had this. Oh yeah, you could get some very, very dangerous potentials indeed, for sure.
Less than 1 minute to go, fellas, so we're going to have to wind up. But thank you very much for popping on, and it's worked, I think, much better this week than previous. Now that I know which information to put up to open the channel up, and it's lovely to see Clint from USA as well.
Yeah, indeed.
That's good.
Anyway,
right. Good night, guys, and
all the best.
Good night,
Fables.
Good night.
And nice to see you all. I don't see you often, TJ, although we speak fairly constantly, either on text chat or on the radio.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah. Less than 1 minute, it says upgrade to pro. No thanks.
No thanks.
No, we'll pass on that.
They're trying to lever some more money out of me, I think. Anybody who calls
our club.
Oh, there it goes. Hang on. We'll put the camera back where it was. Pardon the big nose. And clamp it in position. And I think that... Whoop. No. I haven't got it screwed in properly. I haven't got it screwed in properly, said the girl to the sail. and turn it correctly. There we go. Anyway, I'm going to close now. I've got most of the lights turned off. It's just fortunate that this new camera has fairly good low light performance. But I will hurriedly pull the plug and wish everybody a very good night until next week. This is VK3AML concluding. And I'll be back in a minute to close the live stream.
Good morning, Chris. VK3VJS. Good morning.
Just give me a moment, Jeff. Call of nature.
Understood.
Yeah, VK3VJS, VK3ACZ. Good evening, good morning there, Jeff.
Good morning. It's either Peter or Dave, I'm not sure, bro.
I'll answer to the first of those options.
Okay, Peter, yes. I've been listening all night. I haven't fired up the YouTube because I was watching a film, but I could watch it on another screen, but I was listening at any rate. And I'm sure I heard Professor Julius Sumner Miller there, but I could be mistaken. If it was him, he wasn't flogging a glass and a half. Back to you.
Exactly. No, your ears did not deceive you. The good old professor was on. We saw a clip of him producing EMF. Good to see the old lemon trick. And yeah, fantastic. Some people would remember him from the glass and a half of full cream milk, but the rest of us, and I bet you were in that category too, Jeff, used to race home from school of an afternoon to watch Why Is It So? 3 VJS, 3 ACZ.
No, I was working. I'm a bit older. I was working, and I like the trick where he soaked the egg with a shell. I believe it was the shell in something, and then he'd evacuate the air out of a bottle. Now, how did that work? And he'd suck the egg, shell and all, into the bottle through the vacuum coolers. That's right, he'd heat the bottle up, and he'd put the egg that had been soaked in something, and it made the shell all pliable, and then when the bottle cooled down and the air wanted to get back in, it sucked the egg inside the bottle. Was I right with that trick, Peter?
Yes, I believe you are. I thought it was an egg that had been shelled, but I could be wrong about that. I do remember watching the egg being sucked into the milk bottle, though, Jeff.
Yeah, yes, okay. Yes, anyway. No, everything's okay here. I've just got into bed, showered, shaved, shampooed, and mummed. And I'm just looking up a list here of NDBs, non-directional beacons, or the ones that are left. So we've got 2 or 3 radios that tune down to 100, 150 kilocycles, and I just like to listen to some of the Morse signals that are left on the band. So there you are, nothing else to report from here, everything's okay. So, and I'm only what am I? Oh no, that's okay. Yes, everything's okay here, Peter, back to you.
Yeah, good stuff, VK3VJS, VK3ACZ. Yeah, I have a couple of radios that will tune down into the VLF band, and the trouble is that Moorabbin comes through very, very poorly, so I don't think the receivers are all that good. From here, I would have thought that Moorabbin ATIS information or whatever it is would come through fairly well, and I already can't remember the frequency. Is it 398 or, I don't know, something like that. You'd be the expert anyway, you'll know. But I just get it over here, so as I said, I presume it's a crook receiver.
Yes, that's correct. 398 kilocycles, or on the VHF band, 120.9 megahertz AM. And of course we get it very strong here, only being a few kilometres to the south-southwest. But I was picking up today with another receiver I found in the shed, Whiskey Yankee, and that's Wyndham in Tassie in the daylight. So I think there's something wrong with your receiver, Pete. You might have to get the screwdriver into the, excuse me, the long wave section and a tune-up. Give it a bit of a tune-up on the front end. Back to you.
Yes, possibly. Possibly. That's not bad. I did have an old Sangean radio that I'd hear the various, could pick up Deniliquin's Airfield and Bendigo and all that. I should fire that one up again. It's buried at the bottom of a cupboard somewhere or in a box someplace. But I've gone for these little Tech Sun radios, the little fit-in-your-pocket size radios of more recent times. Actually, is that the one that's got the VLF? Oh, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Not my preferred kind of listening, but I must admit I do like listening to Melbourne, what's it, Approach. Yeah, that's it, Melbourne Approach, 132 even. Most of my Yaesu handhelds have got the aircraft band, so I wander along listening to them from time to time for a bit of entertainment, as well as the regional Lambos, of course, on 160, where are they, around 165, 166, something like. Don't quote me, I can't, just can't remember, it's too late at night. But I gather you know all about that stuff too. And of course I'm an old 168 meg listener from way back. Was very sad when they went to UHF, even though it was very convenient with the voting repeaters and that sort of stuff too. But even sadder when they went digital or digital encrypted, whatever it is. But then again, I'm preaching to the choir, aren't I? Because I'm pretty sure you've vocalised something similar to that yourself there, Jeff.
Yeah, that's correct. I go way back to the end of the broadcast band on about 1630. It was mandatory, Peter, when we bought our old Valve radios from the Black Rock auction house of a Saturday morning, me and Bobby Bennell, VK3ZAC, we'd get the screwdriver in on the pad-up capacitor and we'd start screwing it down. And we had to get the police on 1630 approximately, and then a bit more screwing, and we got the fire brigade on about 1680. So that was mandatory, Peter. And I've had various receivers over the years, Sonys and whatever. I've got a couple of the small Sonys, the paperback-sized ones. And I've also got one of the small Texans with the little loop on the top. That's a fantastic little receiver, that one. Long wave, medium wave, short wave, and FM, extended FM on it. And a heap of other ones, Sonys, Sangens, Realistic, etc., all in the museum. But they still work. That's the main thing, Pete. Give them a tickle up with a screwdriver now and again. Check the batteries, or whatever. And yes, we've been right through, as I said before, 168 and then 486, 7 megs. And I was actually listening the night they switched from analog to digital. And I just threw my arms up in the air and said, well, that's the end of an era. The VK3, I've forgotten your call sign, Pete, VK3VJS.
And 3AML.
Yeah, well, that's all right. It's ACZ, but don't worry about it, Jeff. Anyway, I think you're lying. You're lying through your teeth. You are not old enough to remember when they were at the top end of the medium wave band. No, my dad told me about it not long after he realised that I'd converted my own little radio to 168, and I didn't believe him. I didn't believe you could hear them at the top of the AM band. But there you go. I had my very first attempt at doing that was tuning the Channel 6 biscuit in a television set. Bit of a bummer, though, that there's no squelch of muting whatsoever. But anyway, Chris is back. Chris is back from his call of nature. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
My God, I hope I turned the mic down before I went in for the tiddle. Otherwise, you would have heard it in full fidelity. But I think I did extremely well to do 2 3/4 hours without. But it gets to you. So apologies, but very interested to hear what you say. And the fire brigade, I think, went off 1630, 1640 kilohertz in 1970, I think. And I was 16 then. I mean, when my friends used to have little pocket transistor radios which could just tune to the fire brigade, and we could hear Henry Pierce doing his announcements. So I was in my mid-teens before they switched it off. It took a long time to get rid of it, Peter. I'll hand it round to Jeff, VK3VJS, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML in the group, VK3VJS. Yes, that's correct. They're about, I think around about 1680 from memory, Chris. It was the police, then the fire brigade, and then you had 160 metres. In the early days of the fire brigade, the mobiles used to be on about 1540, using a base-loaded antenna, not vertical, but sort of horizontal, along the ladder rack on the top of the brigades. But when the government wanted 1500 to 1600 for expansion of the broadcast band, then they went and saw Mr. Vinton, and he made them a little transmitter, that AM transmitter on 84 megs AM, and excuse me, to replace the transmitter and the power supply, so they ended up with a solid state power supply in those radios. And I think you're right, about 1970 or something, after Henry retired, they went up to 463. They might have been using STC radios then, Chris. I don't think it was a success. So then they went to 466 using Motorola gear. And that was a bit more efficient, I believe. Now, of course, they're down on 420 using Open P25. The police, of course, 168, they had 10 channels there. And then they went up to UHF. Actually, they started using small UHF handhelds for point duty in the city. And then they gradually changed over from 168 to 468. And that fateful night, when was it? 2006, 10 o'clock at night. It all went silent, and next minute I heard trrr, trrr. So I threw my arms up in despair, turned it off and went to bed. VK3HCL and the group VK3VJS.
Yeah, 3VJS, 3ACZ returning. Yes, and I was listening at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning in 1975 when the very first car check went through on their computer system, and at that time it only said whether it was listed or not. Getting usuals, they still had to go to ring up the MRB, but I suppose I can remember that an IBR took half an hour on a Saturday night, so they must have been very happy with computers, even though I recall hearing that they were offline quite often, or crashed quite often. Now, what was the... Oh, yes, I can remember when they went from 6 channels to 9. That was sometime in the mid-70s. This is a constabulary. I also recall, if I'm correct, Jeff, I'll get you to confirm or deny it, the AMBOs are on around 76 meg somewhere. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, that's correct, Peter. 76 megs, several channels there. They're now on 420 to 422, and I believe they're encrypted. That's the Melbourne ambulance, but as you know, the country ambulances are using an open trunking system on 165. That's interesting. What else was I going to say? The ambulance museum up at Bayswater have got a special license using the original call sign VL4RMF Golf Delta from memory on 76.670 for historic purposes, and I've heard them up there testing. So that's good. And they've got a side-mounted dipole up there at their museum in, what's the name of the road? Jersey Road? Somewhere up in the industrial area of Bayswater. I went up there once to have a look, and there was nobody there, and the front door was open. I yelled, I stuck my head in the door and yelled, and I had to walk around, and I thought, there's nobody here. It appears that they'd gone, and they hadn't locked the front door. So anybody had gone would have been able to go in and take what they wanted. Just as well I'm an honest person, so I hastily backpedaled and got out, and I think I told the factory next door that the door was unlocked. But anyway, they have a lot of old ambulances up there and radio equipment and all that sort of stuff up there if you're interested. VK3AML and the group VK3VJS.
I wasn't aware that there was an ambulance museum, so that's interesting. I know what happened to the medium wave transmitter that was at Eastern Hill. It became the first transmitter of 3CR after they changed the tank coil. I have the original tank coil from that transmitter that Henry used. It's a peculiar sort of a coil. It's about 20 centimetres diameter and about 35-40 centimetres long, silver-plated copper strip, very high Q, with taps on it. I was using it as a 160 metre loading coil for my antenna at one stage back at Surrey Hills. It's in the back shed here now. Somebody has put on the text, no lavatory noises went to air that we could hear, says John Young. And I replied in text, very relieved, pardon the pun, about no lavatory noises. So, thank goodness I hit the right button. Otherwise you would have had the full effect. Yeah, so I'll be interested to see how much radio gear they have at this ambulance museum, presumably some. I don't know. I can just, I think, remember hearing the ambulances above the broadcast band, but they went off way back. It was early 60s, I think, because in the late 60s when I was listening seriously, say from the age of about 11, which was 1965, all I remember is the fire brigade. VK3VJS and the group VK3AML.
Okay, Chris, well, as far as I know, they never were, even though you may have a photostat copy of an ad for Max department store. Was it Max that were involved with 3AK? They did a lot of advertising on 3AK, didn't they, Max Stores, Furniture? And there was an advert there for a console radio. Listen to the police and the ambulance. Well, I always thought they got confused with the fire brigade. But as far as I know, the ambulance were never at the top end of the broadcast band. They were on 76 megs from the word go. But I stand to be corrected, of course. So there you are. Now, there was something else I was going to say. Can't think of it now. It slipped my mind. Yeah, something. Ambulance, no. Fire brigade. No, I can't. Yes, you've seen my museum. Well, I've got a Regency scanner, a UHF scanner, that was imported into the country by 3UZ when the fire brigade went from the end of the broadcast band and 84 megs to 463 megs. Well, they had a contact in California, and he sent this crystal lock scanner out with 2 or 3 of the 463 meg channels in it, and it came up for sale down at the Cranbourne Ham Fest a few years ago with all the documentation. So that I snapped that up real quick, and that's in my museum, and I think I've showed that to you, Chris, Break.
Yeah, I think you have. I'll have to... I should mention, Jeff, that my need to come to Spaghetti Junction has dwindled because JCar has just opened a shop in Middleborough Road in Box Hill. Very close. They must have seen me coming. So when I come down there now, it'll be more for Alltronics than JCar. But I must arrange to come down for a visit, he said, rudely inviting himself. I'll hand it round to Peter, VK3ACZ and group, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ. Oh, I didn't know we were still going through to your live stream, Chris, so I hope you didn't say anything over the top. Jeff, just to put the stomach pump on you a little bit more, 3WX was the AMBO's call sign. I see now if I hear him ever say anything at all, it's calling ESTA, E-S-T-A. I'm not even sure what ESTA stands for. Please enlighten me. And the other one is the Fire Brigade's call sign used to be VL3N8. What do they use now?
The call sign was VKN8, Victor Kilo November 8, but the Melbourne Fire Brigade and the Country Fire Brigade are now known as Fire Services Victoria, but the Country Fire Brigade operate on 168 megs and the Melbourne Fire Brigade, as we knew it, still operates on a 422. I'm lucky to have a P25 receiver that's been programmed, and I can still listen at least to the fire brigades, plural. Back to you, Peter.
Oh, roger that. Yeah, the only other query is, what does ESTA stand for, E-S-T-A?
I thought it was a biblical name for a girl. Stop laughing, Chris. I don't know, Peter. Oh, Chris, some weeks ago, I was listening and possibly watching, and all of a sudden, Trumpet Volunteer by Purcell came on. Well, did you see my note in the comment, Break?
No, I'm just trying to think of the circumstances that would have been. I think there was a video clip that used it as an opening, just briefly. I can't remember which one.
It was an American thing. I made with the comment, I'm waiting for Bob Santa Maria to come on.
Now, let's not get political. Actually, I worked with Bob Santa Maria's daughter, Kathy, who's now unfortunately deceased. She had cancer and died much sooner than she should have, but she worked for the oral history section of the National Library when I was working up there in 1981. Very pretty girl. And she always eschewed her father's politics. Pardon the French. VK3VJS, VK3AML.
Yes, okay. Excuse me for my little bit of frivolity there, but well, I made a comment. Purcell's Trumpet Volunteer. I think the Goons had something to do with the Trumpet Volunteer too, didn't they? From memory, one of their records. But I used to listen and to watch Bob Santa Maria when he came on, even though I'm not Catholic. He was very anti-communist, wasn't he? But when I heard the Trumpet Volunteer, I immediately thought of dear old Bob Santa Maria. But back to you, Peter. VK3ACL and the group VK3VJS.
Yeah, VK3VJS, VK3 Alpha Charlie Zulu. Zanzibar. Bob Santa Maria, now there's a name. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, about 5 to 12 on Channel 9, just before World Championship Wrestling started, we had, what was it, Point of View? Yes, I had no idea what he was talking about because I was a kid. I was just waiting for the wrestling to come on, but yes, there's a name. Wonder what happened to him. I must look him up. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Well, it's not surprising. He's dead. Bob Santamaria had a connection with Prue's father's family. Prue's father was in the same year of divinity school, would you believe, as Bob Santamaria. Prue's father dropped out of it before graduation and went on to be a teacher rather than a priest. But Prue's father was fairly left-wing and was a Labor candidate for the moderates during the Labor split of the late 50s. Used to lecture on the Labor Hour on 3KZ, and within his class, Prue's father, Harold Speed, his name was, headed one debating team at Melbourne Uni, and Bob Santamaria headed the other. And I believe that Rupert Hamer was a member of it too. So Prue's father never quite saw eye to eye with B.A. Santamaria. I remember we used to do send-ups of B.A. Santamaria at high school. He was sufficiently out of step with the times that we found him rather hilarious. And now, Mr. B.A. Santamaria of the National Civic Council. And this guy would be staring stiffly into the screen. He'd say, "Good evening." And then he'd accuse numerous people, usually associated with my father-in-law, of being Reds under the bed. I better get off that subject before we get in trouble. VK3 VJS and the group VK3AML.
Thank you, Peter. Point of view. That was it. Point of view. Oh dear. And another one I used to listen to was Garner Ted Armstrong. The world. Was it the world today tomorrow. Or the world tomorrow? An American bloke. And when he dropped off the perch, his son took over. Geez, we listened to some funny things. When we weren't listening to the police or the fire brigade, that is, or the ambulance. Oh, golly. You wouldn't be dead for quids, would you? Anyway, Chris, thanks for tonight. I'll look it up on YouTube. I've got Elisa now, and I've also got a brand new 55-inch TV with all that built into it, wireless, so I can watch 2 YouTubes at once if I want to. I can watch Mad Russian Drivers on the 55-inch, and I can watch Mad American Drivers on the smaller one. Oh dear. Yes, the wonder of it all. Anyway, look, I'm going to close up here. It's 1:45 nearly, and it's been a long day down the club and a bit of shopping and whatever. Oh dear, never mind. Anyway, all the best, Peter, and all the best, Chris, and I hope Prue is coming good. I know she had a bit of a fall there. I was listening to you before. But she's got guts, that girl. Mm. She'd have to have guts to live with you and to put up with all the RF. Good on her. Back to you. I'll say good morning, Pete. Back to you, Chris, VK3AML and the group VK3VJS.
Yeah, good morning, Jeff.
Yeah, cheers, Jeff. Lovely to have you on. As for Prue, she tolerates ham radio. She doesn't particularly like it or dislike it, but as I heard her say to Anna Sanderson, Tony Sanderson's widow, at least I know where he is on a Saturday night and he's not at the pub. Anyway, I'll hand it round to you to tie the ribbons, Peter. VK3ACZ, good night. It has been a good night. VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
Yes, and it has been a good night too, Chris. Thanks for your efforts again, as always. Look forward to Saturday nights. There's bound to be something entertaining, and you never fail to deliver, so all good there. Yeah, and my best wishes to Prue as well. Look forward to seeing you. Oh, well, we'll be talking on air, I would hope, before the next Sherbrooke Club meeting. You missed our on-air meeting last Monday night, but I also forgot to tell you about it, so sorry about that. And, yeah, Jeff was certainly nothing if not entertaining tonight. So glad he came up on air, and good to hear from him. And looking forward to the next time I meet with you both at perhaps one of Tom's meetings at Columbia Park or something like that, because that's, I've been fortunate enough to meet Jeff a couple of times now at those events. But anyway, yeah, time to hit the sack. So pleased that Geelong had their big win. You're probably a member of the Anti-Football League. I don't know, Chris, but as I said, it was fond memories of my dad when I think of Geelong, and I could only wish he'd been there to see it. Anyway, on air or whenever, look forward to seeing you soon, and good night. VK3AML, VK3ACZ, 7-3, Chris.
Yeah, 7-3, Peter, and thanks for coming up. Yeah, as a final comment, I have a button, I've got the no button. You've heard the no button, that's this one. N-O. I've also got this little button, I'll hold it up to the camera, that's designed to settle arguments with your wife, and it's basically, I'll run through the announcements.
Surely it's my turn. If you're happy, I'm happy. Whatever you say, I'd love to. I couldn't think of anything I'd rather do.
And of course you think the opposite. So when your wife comes in demanding something, you just push the button and...
I'd love to.
It saves you from many an argument. And with that, I'll say goodnight. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima now closing on 147.475, and we'll see people, I hope, next Saturday. I might start a bit earlier, perhaps 9:15 rather than 9:30, because I'm starting to worry about the effect I'm having on Rolly's sleeping hours, and let alone the time in Salt Lake City. VK3AML now closing on 147.475.
Yes, good morning all, but that sounds more like a capitulation speech to me, Chris. Anyway, I'm biased because I'm not married. Good morning all. VK3VJS clear. I want to buy one of those.
Better check with your wife first, but yes, there's a lesson to be learnt there. It's much easier to say yes than to have to go with what follows the word no. All the best, Peter. VK3AML now clear.
Good night.
And a final good night to the people on the stream. From Tom, thank you for staying up so late in Ballarat. I'll be up in Ballarat before too much longer. I owe a visit to my friends at Humphrey Street North, and at the moment I've been tied to the house a little bit by Prue's infirmity, but that's gradually easing up as time goes on. 3ZGC, thanks for being on. John Young, Tom George, Clint Jeffrey, CSJ, nice to hear you there. Ardran, Terry, of course, sorry to hear about the antenna, but hope to have you back on air soon. Who else there? Pirate. There's been a lot of text chat. I'll have to look at Harry Thau and Dave Ranson, of course. So this is VK3AML now closing on the live stream as well as on the air. And we'll see you next Saturday night, hopefully. All the best. Cheers. I hope the picture quality is better with this Logitech Brio camera than it has been in the past. Cheers.